Here she is. Speak of the devil. There you go. And pin. And then number 5. I know Natalia is coming, so
Yeah.
I'd say we wait till maybe 7:05, John, unless they all trickle in before.
Okay.
About 3 or 4 more minutes. Here's Mr. Lemberg, so we've got an alternate if we need. Hey, Steve.
Hello.
Do you go by Steve? I guess I've never asked you.
Yes, Steve is perfect. Thank you.
Okay, cool. I'm wondering if you, Steve, you saw a strange guy that looked exactly like me wandering around your neighborhood yesterday, taking pictures.
I guess I didn't. What was going on?
I was just out there taking some pictures for my newsletter, and the Bate Street district is just really close to the office, so it's an easy one to go take pictures of.
Another house up for sale.
I saw that. Yeah, right in between the, right next to Major Jones' house, right? The
Yep.
one that just got redone.
Are they still alive? Jeff?
Oh.
The wasn't their name Munson? What was their name?
And I don't know. I have not seen him recently. I haven't seen him probably in a few months.
I saw her a couple years ago, but I hadn't seen him for years before that. And the pictures show one of those motorized chairs because their bedroom is upstairs.
Right.
They must be, I bet they're close to 90.
I would say every bit of that. Yep.
Yeah.
Hey,
Hey,
Natalia.
I've got Natalia.
Good
Hey, good evening. Sorry, running late.
3, 4, 5, 6. I think we're good. We've got 6 and an alternate. Let's get this party started.
Yeah, feel free. Steve, you're up if you're willing, and if a regular
Lauren?
member comes on, we'll have you join.
Nick, could you start the recording?
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you.
Also, really quick, did we get the closed captioner?
No, so should I start the live, CC?
Yeah, I think so. If we don't have one.
I think Ann might be a part of the Boji group. So enable auto transcription, right? Jamil?
Yes. Yep.
And then John, I saw Keith's in the waiting room, so I'll bring him in. And then that means Steve, I guess you're on the bench again. But of course, as always, you're a resident and always welcome to make any comments.
I'll stand by if somebody gets taken out of the game and you need someone to come in and pinch it.
Thank you, sir. Okay, thanks everyone. Thanks Laura, thanks Jamil. I guess we're ready to rock.
Okay. Lauren?
Yep, everyone, just a reminder to state your current location. John Henke,
Live from Birmingham.
Keith Dyer,
You're mute, Keith. Okay, I'm here in Harbor Springs.
great. Gigi DeBrecht,
Here in Birmingham.
Natalia Dukas,
Here in Birmingham.
Dustin Colo,
Here in Birmingham.
Patricia Lang. Patricia Lang,
I couldn't hear you. What?
where are you located?
Okay, I wasn't sure you said my name. Birmingham.
Okay. Michael Willoughby,
Here in Birmingham.
Stephen Lemberg,
Here in Birmingham.
Cassandra McCarthy, Charles Cusimano,
Here in Birmingham.
Elizabeth Weekend.
Here in Grosse Pointe Woods.
Great.
Hey, good evening, all. First up, I have the minutes from April 7th, 2021.
I move they be approved as submitted.
I'll second.
Michael Willoughby,
Aye.
Gigi DeBrecht,
Aye.
Keith Dyer,
Aye.
Natalia Dukas,
Aye.
John Henke,
Aye.
Justin Colo,
Aye.
Patricia Lang. Patricia Lang.
Aye.
All right, first up this evening, 210 South Old Woodward, the Plaza. Nick, the floor is yours.
Great. Thanks, John. I see that Roman's on for this. I think Ron's here as well. So we've got good representation from the application side of things. So I'm going to share my screen just so we have something to look at while I summarize this report for you all. This was a design review application submitted for what I call the plaza, which is the name of the whole building, but really the proposed work is only at the southeast corner, which is the former Vinoteca space. As I mentioned, this work at this time, for the purposes of this application, is not associated with a new tenant. It's simply just some exterior facade improvements. Those improvements, as you can see, are pretty much a reimagined storefront. They're proposing to add new hinged windows at the current openings, the outside of the open outdoor space that was formerly used as outdoor dining for Vinoteca. There's going to be a new main entry door back at the storefront, which is technically the storefront. A new storefront system, which includes a roll-down garage door, a new piece of glass, some new flooring material, and planters, steel guardrail, and 6 new windows along the passage adjacent to the Daxton Hotel, the newly finished Daxton Hotel. So all of the materials are really glass and metal that matter. They do have to conform to the downtown overlay standards, which require at least 90% of the exterior finish to be glass, brick, cut stone, cast stone, texture, stucco, or wood. Really, the only significant elements they are adding are glass, so they definitely meet that requirement. They're also going to have to meet the glazing requirements, 70% between 1 and 8 feet. Another interesting requirement I added here from the downtown overlay standards is that sliding doors and sliding windows are prohibited along frontage lines. In my report, as you read, I definitely don't consider those, the proposed hinged windows, to be sliding windows or doors in any way. But it is important, if anyone has any comments on that, to bring it up during your discussion with each other tonight. Signage, there are no signs proposed as a part of this review. I'm sure when they get the tenant secured, that they'll come back and likely do that administratively. In terms of lighting, these fascia panels here, as they call them, I'd like to draw here. These extend out into the right-of-way, and they're proposed to have a little bit of light behind it and light that kind of projects downward just to add a soft light to the space. Pretty simple LED strips, not significant enough to where I requested any sort of photometric plan. I didn't feel as though it altered the illumination on site drastically. They submitted spec sheets and everything for it. So, citing Article 4, Section 4.21C. So if this board feels any differently, please feel free to discuss. Also, even though they are not very intense, we do still have a requirement that fixtures are cut off, but there is an opportunity for some relief from that part of the ordinance if the Historic District Commission, in this case, feels as though there are 6 standards that they would have to meet, or I'm sorry, not all of them. You read through them to summarize. Basically, that the lighting's controlled, it's not distracting, it's consistent with downtown, the scale's appropriate, is it for architectural features, and does it meet all the other requirements? So if it meets any one of those, this board is able to approve the lights even though they are not full cutoff. Lastly, there are just some planning and zoning issues that I brought up. One was parking, just to say we talked about it. This particular space and building is in the parking assessment district, so they do not have to provide any off-street parking spaces. There are also no landscaping beds on site, but as you can see here, they are proposing some planters with some ivy, as it is with their kind of signature at this point, I'd say, maybe. But I wanted to note that English ivy is prohibited. They didn't say what the plant material is, but I just want to let them know, if they didn't already know, that English ivy is prohibited. And lastly, glazing is, well, not lastly, excuse me, second to last, glazing that I mentioned earlier. They did provide glazing calculations that show 70% of the facade area between 1 and 8 square feet is clear glazing. They have also submitted the VLT calculations, which you saw on the first page of the plans, that that they have advised me applies to all glass, that all the glass will meet the 80% visual light transmittance requirement, including the hinge doors, the garage, the overhead garage door, the transoms, all of it. Now, lastly, the projections into the right-of-way. Earlier, I mentioned these fascia panels stick out into the right-of-way. The dimension is about 1 foot. So this board has the ability to approve those projections into the right-of-way if they find it appropriate. They don't interfere with any streetscape, which they don't. The only one I had a problem with is this one alley that sticks out technically into neighboring private property. Now, I spoke with the applicant about this. They agreed from the sounds of it, they're willing to take that back in. That was just kind of a minor oversight. So I mentioned it in my report that they'll have to deal with that, and I think they will. So overall, the Planning Division did recommend approval for this design review application for 210 South Old Woodward with the 3 conditions, and I'll summarize that were in your report. They must receive approval for the non-cutoff light fixture, as well as the projections into the right-of-way, and they must either enter into a lease with the Daxton property for the projection into the alley, or retract it to be not a projection at all. So if anybody, as always, would like to see any specific sheets, let me know. But John, I send it back to you, sir.
All right. Questions for the petitioner on this one?
John?
Keith?
I guess the only question I had, Nick, is in the past when we looked at this building, we were kind of concerned about balance when you looked at the whole facade. Did you get a rendering that showed the whole facade or just the south end?
Hold on.
So I have facade elevations, but the 3D renderings were just for the
but the rendering sort of comes from the southeast, Keith. That's the closest you get. Is the color? The colored rendering is only a port. That one. It's the only one that's in the drawing.
So then you see this elevation that has the whole facade, but the rendering is
just a black and white elevation.
So I guess you can, I mean, if you want to ask the petitioner to explain their design choice, I suppose that's appropriate, but.
Yeah, I mean, because my only reason for raising that is in the past, when we were looking at the signage, we were trying to balance that across the facade. And I was just wondering what the visual impact would be of only dealing with the southeast corner.
In terms of signage, you're saying?
No, I'm just in terms of overall balance when you look at the facade.
Okay. Well, if you'd allow me, I'd like to defer to the applicant. I guess I don't necessarily know, and I hadn't obviously included that in my memo. So, John, would you like to have Roman answer?
Roman?
Good evening.
I'm guessing this is your bailiwick.
Bailiwick or not. The issue is that we have one end of the building, which is an occupiable space. The other portion, which is the balance component that Mr. Dyer's referring to, is part of the circulation and ramping to get down to the sidewalk. there must be some accommodation to allow for the occupancy of a space that works within the ordinance. If it comes down to a matter of maybe introducing the stainless components, I could certainly pitch that to the building owner, as we are contracted by him to do this particular piece, and we could appear in front of the board again if he wished to entertain that. Right now, we've also had discussions about renovating the entire building, but at this time, he's only had us address this portion of the building. We wouldn't present it if we didn't believe that it was harmonious with the building itself and that it highlighted the occupancy that we're proposing at that end. But that was the extent of our work. We're trying to remain harmonious with the entire building, but we're addressing an occupancy at this end versus part of the circulation path of the building at the other.
Of course, look at all these buses and stuff in front.
There you go. That helps.
That is a perfect example of what Vinoteca was allowed to do previously, and we're looking to provide an environment for a more successful tenant there now.
Right.
That project I'll just mention because I think it's all relevant. The project, when it was previously taken over, was done on a shoestring, working with primarily everything that the previous, was it North there before? Is that the name of that nightclub? What was it? South, sorry. That's how much I blocked it out of my memory, that I've taken it 180 degrees wrong. In this case, the building owner's plans are to pretty much make all the corrections on the interior to accommodate a new restaurant user, and that'll be in front of the planning boards and everything in the future. Trying to get a jump with the weather being so nice and the time that it's taking to get a project designed for his tenant, which I believe he also has an ownership interest with, which is why I guess the time is okay that he's taking with it. But seeing the opportunity to make the improvements to the exterior of the building was very important to him. So we were contracted to submit this first piece to you. That's all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Roman on the south side with the Daxton. Given what I know, I suspect a lease probably isn't in the works. So has there been discussion?
We're going to flush that out.
Okay.
Precisely.
So,
it's gonna. You can make that a condition of the approval that we will make it flush with the adjacent piers. Too bad.
Well, if you're going to do that, isn't going to be unbalanced with the north one that now suddenly is a foot out? So from the street view, it's going to look a bit awkward.
It's the way that you really encounter this both as a pedestrian and in a vehicle from across the street. You may notice it as you go around the corner. We believe that the offset is very important because there's an important lighting effect. Listen, if anything, I would appreciate the opportunity that the condition that may be placed on this would leave open the option for a lease agreement, even though you and I both know what the condition that exists there. But the design has been defined for the Daxton, and maybe there's a negotiable consideration to be had there. But either way, we would take that off, and we believe it would be important to leave the other ones in place.
Okay.
John, how much does it extend into the alley right now? So what would be the difference between the front and the south?
12 inches.
There'd be a foot difference between the two. But so when you stand across the street, sort of at the angle of where that, if you took it straight on right there, you would notice it. Not
even then,
but it'd
John,
be one
I'd
you'd
say
have to
barely.
look for. Right. Yeah.
But it would even be barely.
I'll give you that. I'll give you that, Roman. It's not going to be significant glaring, but you would see it.
No. It does begin, you know, at the end of that pier, and just even the parallax of being directly across the street.
Right.
It'd be very uncommon to be able to notice both sides at the same time. And even then, as you experience moving around the building because the materials are the same, that alone would please the eye in terms of trying to recollect what was on the other sides.
Hey, Roman, my other question is, what's with the planners?
It's not English ivy, guys. This stuff goes down, not up. We want the planters there. Right now, we're not proposing what plants are going in there. That'll be part of the restaurant presenting to the boards in the future. But what we're trying to show is that there is some discussion. There is room on the sidewalk here for an outdoor cafe component. Maybe it's potato vine. Maybe it's similar to the way the planters in the city are planted. But we're not specifying anything on that. That would be a specific associated with whatever slup is going to appear in front of the planning commission.
Okay,
as it comes
so
down the
in
line.
terms of that,
It's
I'd
for
like
sure
to make
not
sure
English
that,
ivy.
all right, so whatever motion's made, I want to make sure that that's excluded because it is on the drawings and I don't want to come back at some point in time and somebody say, well, HDC already approved this when it gets before planning for the SLUP or the city commission on the
Understood.
SLUP.
Knowing
So
Jim,
I'd like to leave
it'll
that
be changed
portion
4
for another
times
day.
before then.
Right. And that's my concern. So I don't want it to, somebody to say, well, you guys approved this way back when, you know, even tacitly because it's on the drawing.
I get
John,
it.
may I clarify too? Are you saying you can approve the planters, but make sure not to specify planting material?
No planters.
Oh,
What I don't want to do is
That's fine.
approve, because you don't have the design of the planters, you have nothing with respect to the planters other than the one elevation drawing. So no, and Keith will remember this. I'll go back to the Marcia Row bottom day. No planters. Other than that, I don't see any other issues. Does anyone else have any questions or comments for Roman or anyone else? Given that, do I have a motion?
I have a motion. I'll do a motion to approve. I don't have the verbiage in front of me, though.
I'll pull it up for you, Patricia. Just zooming in for us. Hold tight. And you'll just have to, or maybe John, maybe you can just do a friendly amendment at the end, but whatever you want to do with the planters starts here.
Right here, okay. Motion to approve the design review application for 210 South Old Woodward, the plaza, with the following conditions. The applicant must receive approval from the Historic District Commission for the use of the non-cutoff light feature. The applicant must receive approval from the Historic District Commission for the projections into the right-of-way. And the applicant must enter into a lease with the neighboring property owner or retract the south fascia panel so that there is no projection into the neighboring private property.
Okay. And then Patricia, if you just add a friendly amendment that even though it's in the rendering, that there are no planners approved for as part of this design.
In addition, there are no planters approved with this design.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
And John, may I ask before we vote, Patricia read the conditions of approval, but I'm not sure if you.
Yeah, we should have, right. Is everyone fine with, and we could do it, so everyone's fine with the projections into the right of way?
Yep.
Yes.
And the non-cutoff light fixture feature of the low casting LEDs in the projections.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Given that, any further discussion on the motion? If not, Lauren?
Patricia Lang,
Aye.
Judita Brecht,
Aye.
Keith Dyer,
Aye.
Natalia Dukas,
Aye.
John Henke,
Aye.
Dustin Cola,
Aye.
Michael Willoughby.
Aye.
All right. Thank you, Roman. I know you got another one coming up. Next up
Yes,
this
sir.
evening, 255 South Old Woodward, Cosmo Salon Studios, as we move across the street.
All right. I'll share my screen again. So, as you alluded to, John, another design review application quite close by, 255 South Old Woodward, future tenant space of Cosmo Salon Studios. It's, again, this is another one that's located in the Central Business Historic District, but it is not a historic building, nor does the Planning Division feel that it's eligible at this time. So we're here just on the formality that it's in the downtown district. So we won't be applying the standards just like the last review we just did. Essentially, the changes are 80% here, what you're looking at, signage, 4 new awnings, and a new door. There are also proposals for a new rooftop unit and some ductwork at the rear of the building in the alley. The awnings are simple black canvas awnings. That front door is going to be more of a custom brass entry door. There's going to be some brass framing on the entry vestibule only. And then the metal ductwork is metal, and the RTU is standard for a building this size. Highlight that entryway real quick. This is similar to the other review we just did in that there are some downtown overlay standards that the applicant must meet. Same 90% exterior finish material, colors that are congruent with the adjacent buildings, and storefronts that are accessible from the sidewalk with 70% glazing. There really are no changes to the storefront in terms of facade materials. That's mostly brick and glass as it is, so the applicant maintains that conformity. We also feel that the color palette's pretty consistent with downtown. Maybe not necessarily this building. As you can see, the other awnings are blue, so they're obviously trying to highlight this tenant space and make it its own little space. But the colors in general aren't overly different from the rest of downtown. And they, since there were no changes to the windows, they're still at, if they aren't at 70% glazing, they don't really have to provide the calculations necessarily because there were no changes in the amount of glazing. As far as the signage goes, you saw a pretty, this a pretty extensive sign plan that was submitted for the whole building. I think it's this page. So there's a bunch of existing signage, and then the three new, proposed signs. To summarize, with an additional 25% allowance for that building identification sign for Swift Home Loans, they're allowed 266 square feet of signage for the entire building. These three particular signs here total up to about 41 square feet, and the whole building comes to 225 square feet of signage total, which comes in about 40 square feet underneath the maximum allowed. So they're good in that regard in terms of signage. Lighting, it's similar again to the previous review we just did. They're just proposing some minor accent lighting above the canopy or the awnings, just to bring some soft light to the space and attract more attention to the storefront. Again, I didn't require photometric because we did not feel as though it drastically altered the illumination on site, citing the same zoning ordinance section. They've also submitted spec sheets. The same applies here in that those LED strips that they're proposing are not cut off, so they're going to need approval from this board if you choose to approve them to move forward with those non-cut off light features. Couple of planning and zoning issues that I had reviewed for us. Again, this is in the parking assessment district, so there are no off-street parking spaces required. With the addition of the rooftop unit, though, I did note that screening is required for all new rooftop units. let's, if this were a replacement of an existing unit and the same size, same shape, same placement, we typically don't require new screening, but since this is a new unit, we would require it to be to code. So that would require a screen wall that, screens it from public view. We're going to need the specs on that RTU and whatever they propose to screen it with. Now, whether or not they decide to, or the building owner, I should say, decides to go and screen this whole area of units is one thing, but we do note there that it'll be a condition of approval that they screen that new unit at least. Again, with glazing, they meet the glazing because they didn't make any changes. And similarly, again, there are some projections into the right-of-way. Although there's 4 new awnings, really only one projects into the right-of-way, and it's the one on the South Old Woodward facade. It projects 3 feet into the right-of-way and meets that section of the ordinance. So at this point, all that's required is the approval from this board, again, if you so choose to approve it. All that being said, we did recommend that the Historic District Commission approve this design review application for 255, again with 3 conditions, very similar, that the applicant receive approval for the cutoff light fixture, or the non-cutoff light fixture, I should say. We need specification sheets and screening for the new rooftop unit, and the applicant receive approval for the projection into the right-of-way. Stop my share, John. Happy to answer any questions, and back to you.
Questions for the petitioner? Natalia?
So I have no problem with them differentiating their awnings a little bit and having different color, and it looks like a bit of a different shape. But not just because of the one that's in the right of way, but since they're right next to each other, it's since that's it's a little unclear to me. Are they in shape, or do they project the same amount into the right of way as their neighbors' awnings? Or how drastically different are they from each other?
Roman?
We looked to the existing awnings and copied them. And I will say that, again, working with the building owner here, his last comments to me will be, well, I'm okay with black because then I'll change all my awnings to black on the building. So I have a feeling you'll be seeing a package come through to revise all of the awnings on the building. And John, if that answers your question, we use the exact form and projection and angle, and we just modified slightly the detail where they're not fully enclosed on the ends. Nicholas, if you could pull up the rendering one more time. It's hard to discern because of the dark, the proposed black color on the awning, but if you look at the side of it, maybe we could zoom in on that a little bit, Nick, on that upper one, because you'll see that we're enclosing about 2/3 of the end panels on them. You see it with the loose flap that continues down.
That was my question, because I didn't see a detail on the awnings. Roman,
are you sure?
I may have
that
missed
doesn't
it.
sound like Nicole. Yeah, it's yes. On sheet A2, the awning and sign section detail indicates that and you see the note for the canvas returns on side points up to the closed triangle.
All right, so it goes up 20 inches from the bottom of the awning.
That's correct.
Or 18
and the
inches. I can't tell if it's 1/6 or 1/8.
It is one. I can't. My eyes are not that good. I'm sorry.
Yeah, mine either. And that was even on the drawing. I couldn't see it.
It looks like 1/8.
But the LED strips are actually on not to illuminate underneath the awning and down, but actually on top of the awnings to illuminate the exterior of the awnings.
Correct, which would then result, Nicholas, if you could go back to the rendered version of that, it would result in an angled back LED light fixture, because we are permitted to face illuminate our signage here, but not internally illuminated. But the opportunity along the tops, you could see that
extra bump detail on the front of each
Right.
of those awnings.
So this is
in
the
order to
toss
cast a little light
back onto the building.
That's correct.
Okay.
And they're not very powerful. It'll cast up 18 inches, 24 inches. That's it. We were cognizant of the neighboring windows upstairs.
Okay.
I have a question. How does the medallion attach to the corner?
With the corner bracket that would support it. On sheet A2, again, you'll see that there's a detail number 3.
There it is, right there. Yep.
Right there.
That's the part I'm the least fond of.
If I could speak to that for just maybe I'll take 30 seconds of the board's time. This is a tough one for us because this is the 6th Cosmo Salons that we've done, and we've defined the brand for this particular client of ours. And typically his colors are red. Well, number one, if you look at the other salons in town up the street, you've got 6, which has a red presence on the street and through the storefront. It was important for us to differentiate ourselves from that. Not to mention that, again, the building owner pretty much said that red was going to happen over his dead body. So in those 2 regards, we believed that the black was the best way to approach it. And although we're showing windows blacked out, we have interior decor in the space that is well, that you'll be looking through the windows back into the space, which is an important aspect of us marketing the brand of that entire salon through. No different than when you walk by 6 and look through 6, for instance, the way that they've dealt with it, and the other salons in town. It's very subtle. Oh, and the point of me saying any of this was a long and hard struggle, having lost our brand's colors on the exterior of the building. And this was a compromise after maybe 6 or 7 tries to get the clients on board and the building owner also to be able to approve what the final was going to be. And in fact, it creates a beautiful little piece of jewelry right on that corner.
Any other questions for?
John, I'd like to mention that as I was inquiring about our building permit, which has been held up for a number of weeks waiting for this meeting, part of what we're discussing here too is that although there were no changes to the percentages of the glazing on the front, our relocation of the entry out towards the street with the stair and the ramp component is what the building department is waiting to release our building permit, and it wasn't even discussed as part of this meeting. So either Jeff Zilke's got it wrong over there. Nicholas, if you would.
Yeah, so that was actually submitted separately as an administrative approval, and that's actually been done for some time. So, and by some time, I'm not talking months or weeks, but it's been done for a few days at least. There might have just been some miscommunications here, but
no problem.
Well, the simple flip-flop of the door was no problem. It got administratively approved so that the work can get started on the inside, but it obviously hasn't. So
Roman, I do have one question. Why the brass when there are other instances in other of these locations that are stainless and either greenery behind them or black behind them?
Because in this one, as our model develops over time, first of all, we're not necessarily matchy-matchy. And the brass, in our opinion, was going to be the better solution in this case based on how the interior design has been handled for the tenant.
All right. So, and typically I wouldn't ask because the interior is not part of our purview. But, and I suspect the building owner has some input in this. Is it going to have the red carpeting and red walls that others
There will be red carpeting. There will be some flower walls in it, numerous other devices that have come to play in all of those places. But believe me, to
Okay.
get his signature on this, we have to resubmit it through him many, many times to get it to an approved state.
Okay.
John,
Other questions for Roman or Keith?
Yes.
I have one
Yeah.
for Nick, I think.
I'm sort of bothered by the LED lights on top of each one of the awnings. Originally, when I looked at it, I thought it was going to provide a subtle downlight to the awnings in order to provide some differentiation between these awnings and the other awnings and the site. But then Roman said a minute ago that they're actually projecting upward about 18 inches in order to light the signage, which means the other ones that have no signage are going to have about 18 inches of light also.
Correct. That is correct. And
yeah, that
our
just
details.
it seems out of context for the whole rest of the building. I mean, we've now totally differentiated. I mean, if the lights were just there on the two awnings to light the sign, I'd certainly understand that. But again, I don't see lighting the building the rest of the way.
Yeah, especially in light of Roman's comment that if we're going to black awning every one of the windows,
Yes.
you know, I'd be concerned that the next step is that track of light across every awning across that entire building.
No. Let me clarify that, please. Again, with the difficulties arriving at a means by which to differentiate this tenancy from the balance of the tenancies, the fact that we anticipate the future is going to be seeing all black units on here, the importance of us being able to differentiate this piece of facade, because, for instance, Harp still has their ornament and embellishment on top of their awning components, which incorporates their sign and carries out as a means of identifying their storefront. This is the method and means being used specific for the Cosmo Salon, and the landlord is not planning on putting lights. You could hold him to that because the lights are ours. That's part of our storefront embellishment, since we're not given any other opportunity. What you can see through the windows is it.
So part of my concern with all of this, beyond the obvious of lighting all of them, is these salons, again, Roman, and I know typically I wouldn't delve into the interiors, but because these interiors are, I will say it very diplomatically, a bit bold in terms of color and design, that's going to radiate onto the street, given as much glazing as there is. So to sort of exacerbate that with the awnings as well being lit, this corner is going to be sort of lit up a bit much.
So John, so that you know, the balance of the storefront that runs within the plaza area itself are the interiors of studios. That's not where the bang is put on the design of the studio. The fact that we have that one corner with two windows is no different than passing by any storefront that's in the space. That one window-based storefront to allow the presence of that interior storefront to show through. And again, you don't have any other ordinance requirements. We know not to hang signs behind the window and that there's a distance to be met, and we're not doing any neon in there or anything like that. But it's the only opportunity to express within the 10 feet that somebody walks by that piece of storefront to understand that you've got a special tenancy in that space. That the balance of that stuff going on the plaza, not to mention it's not on the street and barely visible. You drive or walk by, they're boring salon interiors, and for whatever reason, the users like to keep blinds down for a degree of privacy. So how is that back and forth? This is different than 6, for instance, which is a public statement with an open public salon. These are individual suites. We have one window at the corner to express everything, and we've had everything else taken away from us on the outside of the building. That's our only opportunity. And we're not going to do anything stupid. I mean, there will be a rose wall as a backdrop about 15 feet back from the window. And then you're looking down corridors with beautiful light fixtures. So I can't see how this board could possibly, in this building, in the way that plaza's been kept up till now, in this building to have that type of issue with it, I can't understand it. It doesn't make any sense.
Well, and I'm just concerned about it. Does anyone know what I'm talking about with respect to the interior designs? Has anybody seen this? Nick, I don't know if they'll be able to see this. I'll hold this up to the screen, but this is the Clarkston location. When you look inside, that's what you're going to see.
No, you won't, because that happens to be already inside the building down a T corridor that you're looking down a main avenue down the center of the space. In our case, we're looking at an entrance lobby right at the corner, and then you'll see one corridor and one corridor with lighting going down both sides. It's a completely different animal.
All right. I just want to make sure, Roman, because you know
I get
this
it, John.
is, you know, Philippe Stark reincarnated about mid 1990s. Keith.
Yeah. Again, I am concerned. I understand the lights, the LEDs above the awnings to light the signage, and I'm okay with that. The other two, though, are lighting the building. And if you, in the past, we've always thought that if we were lighting the building, we wanted to light an architectural feature in order to enhance that on the building. All this is doing is washing the wall and throwing some light up there to differentiate this space from other spaces. So I'm sorry, but I think that flies in the face of what we talked before about uplighting on the building.
And my thought, I agree with you, Keith. I think my thought on the LED lighting at this point would be I'm fine with the ones that are immediately below the signs as a way to illuminate the signs, but the others I think are a bit superfluous on this building. Anyway.
I know Roman doesn't agree, but
John?
It's not the first time, Ron. Roman and I will disagree.
John?
Same with you, John.
Sorry, Michael?
Thank you. I actually agree with Roman. I think what it does is it shows a continuity through the entire tenant space. And the fact that it's going to illuminate some brick will give this nice glow of light both into the plaza and then around the corner on the Old Woodward. So I don't think it's offensive. I don't think you have to. I think light's a very powerful tool, and I don't think you use it just to illuminate signs. I think you can use it to create an artistic expression, which is what I think they're doing here. I also had a question, and that is, are these planters part of the project?
The planters we have submitted, we're also improving the plaza for the owner, for the building owner. And we have submitted a separate package, and we're showing this as to be in contact, which once again, you should for sure mention the planters are not part of it, because there's an entire plaza remake that I think maybe we could bullied him into improving that plaza.
But you're not asking.
So there is a separate package under submittal. Nick, I believe that it's even already been submitted. Yeah, it's a separate thing. So you could note that none of the planters, but we're talking about mother-in-law tongues and a very nice stainless planter holder so the plants could change out wintertime arbs, little things to just try to keep that plaza engaged. At this time, he didn't want us to submit all the custom furniture we designed for it. He'll pursue that on his own over time, but we have created a space for in the city along Woodward. That area has always been kind of underutilized in a big way. It's not very good.
Thank you.
Natalia?
Well, going back to the lights, whereas I usually agree with Keith, in this particular case, I'm actually with Michael. It seems to me that for lights would provide continuity to these new awnings. Otherwise, we're starting to get a lot of, we have different awnings, different lighting fixtures on different awnings. There starts to be a hodgepodge of things, and I'd rather keep it uniform personally.
Well said.
And I'd agree, and I was good with it until Roman had suggested that there may be a canopy pan for the entire building.
Well,
That would argue more for having the lights for this tenant.
Maybe, maybe not.
see, I view that we're approving the plan as submitted, not something
Correct.
based on something in the future that may or may not happen. When that comes in front of this board, we can discuss or potentially deny any other lighting fixtures, and I think Roman understands where we stand on differentiation. So in my opinion, it would make more sense to keep the lights on all of the awnings or not have them at all.
Other questions or comments? Do I have a motion?
I'll motion to approve.
I'll pull it up again for you so we can get the full. And this time, if you wouldn't mind, Patricia, making sure that we know that you approve or direct everybody to approve or whatnot for the light fixtures and the projections.
And before we do that really quickly, Roman, screening on the RTUs and the new spec.
Oh, if we could talk about that. So that's an unusual situation. Nick, you don't still have Google Earth open, do you, by any chance?
Sure, I do actually.
This is an unusual situation. There's a ton of equipment up on that roof.
Then
We're
this is
facing
on the back
parking
side
deck
of the
over an
building.
alley.
Right.
Back
on
side of the
alley
building,
side.
over an alley. Yeah, and you could see every piece of equipment. If we put a screen up there from that top deck, if you were to just zoom over and get the slight view on it, every car there is overlooking everything that's there. And my suggestion would be, first of all, we're so bummed out we have to put a unit up there because there's 3 split systems in the space that are just functionless for what we have to do in the space. And the only way around it was to engage the engineering and actually spend the money on this unit up there, which is, it kills us to have to spend that much money. Typically, we can go into a lease space and have a reasonable system that we can add to. Here, we're providing a brand new 4-stair system into the space. And the thought of providing one piece of screening along the back of our unit, and I can guarantee you that the landlord will not be willing to engage in providing additional screening on his existing equipment there. I would suggest that's almost silly in this specific instance where there's these conditions. In fact, you couldn't see it from Woodward if you tried. The deck is above this space. If it requires, I believe the way Nicholas worded it in the motion, if it requires a variance, this would be a condition that I would pursue the variance unless it prevented us from being able to start construction with the permits sitting and waiting for us. And we're very proud of this permit. There were no review comments. We made it all through in one pass except waiting for these logistics. I believe the owners would flip out and pay to add that piece of screening. I'm being forthright with you because of the conservancy of time on this and the ability to proceed with the project. COVID is slowly lifting, and the opportunity to try to get something happening this year would be very important for this ownership.
Yeah, and I guess, John, just to say, I don't think you'll find anybody here that disagrees that it's a 4-story building or 3-story building. No one's ever going to see them. It's on the back.
But we can't approve it because it's an ordinance issue.
It's a classic case of there's no wiggle room. And
Right.
yes, it could be a dated ordinance, could use some changing.
But we can't approve it.
Well, then we'll proceed with mounting some, because Nicholas, I would assume that a variance would hold up the approval process to release our permit.
I believe it would, Rom. So what you may want to do is, what I'd suggest is we could make the motion with Nick, giving Nick the ability to administratively approve the RTU and the screening if he felt it was appropriate. If not, bring it back along with, if you elect to not do the screening and go to the BZA, then you could do so. but we've just got to make sure, as both Nick and I have said, and we cannot, as this board, approve something that's in violation of the ordinance, that needs the ordinance compliance.
I totally understand that. So John, if it's at all possible to get that type of condition, that we can pursue a variance unless we find that the variance, that hold off on the installation. I just need that permit release and I'll pursue a variance. But if the variance is going to put us out of getting a certificate of occupancy, I'll put up a screen along that small portion of our unit. And by the way, we're orienting our unit long way in onto the building. So we're really talking about the end view of our mechanical unit, which is 5 feet wide. So I'll do that. I'll put it up there.
I think that's a question after tonight best left for Mr. Zilke.
We can work together on that, Roman. I don't think that's a big issue.
Okay.
Okay, given all of that, back to Patricia's motion.
Oh, yes, let me share again. So this is the motion that you had asked for, Patricia.
Yes, can you clarify? You wanted me to state something differently?
Yeah, just like last time, just make sure that you mention that if this is what you're going to do, that the Historic District Commission approves the non-cutoff and approves the projection in conditions 1 and 3.
At the end, I say that.
As part of the motion, instead of reading it and saying the applicant must receive approval, read it as the applicant is approved for the use of the cutoff lighting. The applicant is approved for the projections into the right of way.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay. Motion to approve the design review application for 255 South Old Woodward Cosmo Salon Studios with the applicant is approved from the HDC for this use of the non-cutoff light feature. The applicant is, let's see, RTUs and provides.
Second one's good.
The applicant must submit specification sheets for all proposed RTUs and provide screening for such to obtain a variance from the Board of Zoning Appeals. And applicant is approved from the Historic District Commission for the projections into the right-of-way.
Second.
Do I have a second?
I second.
All right. Any discussion on the motion? I don't think we have any public comment, so back to us. Lauren?
Patricia Lang.
Aye.
Gigi DeBrecht.
Aye.
Keith Dyer.
Nay.
Natalia Dukas.
Aye.
John Henke.
Aye.
Justin Colo.
Aye.
Michael Willoughby.
Aye.
Thank you all very much.
Thanks, Roman.
I'll follow up with you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
And John, again, my nay is not for what was, by and large, what was proposed, but I really believe that lighting over those awnings was inappropriate.
Yeah, I had a little bit of concern, but it wasn't enough for me to hold up one way or another. I'm sort of with you on that, Keith, given the comments. All right, last review for this evening, 100 South Old Woodward, the Parks Maplewood Building, formerly known as Panera, formerly known as Mosley's. Nick?
All right. Yes, forgive me. I'm just pulling it up and getting a couple things ready that I didn't have ready.
While we're doing that, as a preface for a number of the commissioners, Nick and I were asked at the request of Mr. Soroki, the architect, and Mr. Boji, the owner, to meet with them preliminarily to discuss a number of items with respect to this. As you can see in the package, you'll recall that the original discussion with respect to this building was one of two things: that the building owner would either, after the exploration of the travertine, decide to remain with the travertine if in fact the brick were too deteriorated or were not what was expected to be there, which was the brick from the 1880s from the original building, or would hopefully agree that whatever it was that was underneath the travertine would be used, and that would become and remain the historic portion of the building. There's a photograph that's been discovered and submitted to us from the 1960s. I would estimate it somewhere between 1967 and 1969, given the cars, that shows the building is the red brick with lower windows. What I would describe as a typical commercial mid-century design, which is what is best can be discerned is what's remaining in the building underneath the travertine at this time. So there's been a lot of investigation. I hope everybody has had the opportunity to go out and look at the building since the travertine's been removed, so that it is the 1960s brick. A lot of the monumentation, a lot of the ornamentation from the 1880s has been removed, the eyebrow windows, such. So as part of that discussion with Mr. Soroki and Mr. Boji, it's been that they now have what we would deem a mid-century historic building that they are faced with restoring or renovating as they see fit. Given all of that,
No.
I have told them one of the things that they have proposed in the design, again, are transom windows above what's existing. In my personal opinion, that is not consistent with either the building or a mid-century design, nor are the I-beam canopies with the metal stanchions. This is, if this building is to remain a mid-century historic design building consistent with that theme, the large brick facade is part of it. And I think that's what we should look at when we're talking about this particular design. I will say, and Mr. Boji and Mr. Soroki know this is part of my wheelhouse. I am a huge mid-century design guy. If any of you have ever seen my furniture collection, I know Michael has. He knows I know this stuff well. So in terms of Victor and Ron, I'm going to tell you now, as I told you in the meeting we had the last time, I am going to hold your feet to the fire with respect to this building, because my other concern is, and I know you've said this isn't, is whether you or someone down the road looks at this building and says it's not historic because it isn't the 1880s and it's not the 1969 travertine, that someone will attempt to delist this building and suddenly make it 5 stories. I will vehemently and adamantly make sure that that does not take place in any portion of whatever we approve for you. Nick, all yours.
Well, okay, so let me, thanks for the tee off, I guess, John. I don't have to do much but walk around the bases, I guess. So let me share
Was I ambiguous somewhere?
So I'll just run through the basics, I guess, then, John. As John mentioned, there's a lot of history to these buildings. I gave you the rundown of the actual history that we have in our files in the beginning. Not going to go over that again, but they're both very early, very early 1900s or late 1800s buildings. We know that the Wooster building is generally intact, which is the building to the north, whereas the Parks building, as we know, had that travertine affixed to it, so it was a mystery. Last meeting, which was on November 18th, we approved a design with the condition that they do some investigative work to assess the condition and then come back to us with the proposal based on what they found. So that's the meeting today. They've discovered that, unfortunately, the late 1800s brick facade was removed at some point. There's a lot of dates getting thrown around 1960s. We don't know for sure at this point. So we are just referring to it as a mid-century facade. As John mentioned, there's a lot of clues in the picture we have, but for now we're calling it mid-century. So here they are. And as John said in that meeting, they had some ideas for us, and we felt as though the restoration of the mid-century facade was the most appropriate in terms of two choices that, well, three choices that we had left, which was either to keep the travertine on, renovate the mid-century, or tear the whole facade down and rebuild a new one. So we're here with the middle option, and basically it's just that. The proposal is to keep the brick, keep the window openings on the second floor, rehab the limestone bands on both buildings, remove that mansard roof and keep the brick. There's a nameplate up there too on the Parks building. On the Wooster building, again, they're including the Wooster building, which I'll, for those who don't know, either at home or whatnot, this building here is the Wooster building, whereas this bigger building is the Parks. So they're proposing a whole new storefront on the Wooster building, removing that paint that the bakehouse did, new canopies across on both buildings, but also, if you all didn't know, these two buildings as a whole are actually on one parcel, but they are designated as separate historic buildings. The second floor in both buildings is actually combined presently as a current condition. And what they're proposing to do is, at this point, is to also now combine the first floors and the basements of both buildings to essentially act as one building, although it will still remain separate in our files, in our historic files. There are still separate buildings. It appears as though all the changes they're making in terms of combinations, those are all reversible as required in the standards that we'll get into later, but that's the basic gist of it. So the majority of the work is going to be rehab. There are some punctures from the travertine. As I mentioned, it was affixed with copper wires that were then set into the brick. Each panel had 4 or 5, so there are some significant damage, and especially across the area right above the first floor windows. We'll call it the sign band, where there were either some old canopies, some old signage. There are some bigger holes and more significant damage in that area that's going to have to get rehabilitated, but they are proposing to do that. As John mentioned, they're also proposing these new transom windows here in these areas, as well as these new steel canopies with frosted glass tops. They're also proposing, if you have been by any times recently, I don't want to use a box here, I'll use a line. Some of the Panera building windows go straight to grade. They're proposing to reinstall the brick base that was evident on the old mid-century building, which I'd actually like to show you now that I've referenced it a couple of times, John and I. This is the photo we have of the Parks building from that mid-century time period. So this building being Parks, this building being Wooster. So this is the photograph we have. You see that the transoms were eliminated at some point, unfortunately. The second floor window openings are all pretty much the same. Same with the Wooster building. It's got two entries here and here, one for the retail, one for the upper floors. That got put in at some point. It looks like these windows here were, I actually don't even know the term for them, but you can see here that they're open. Had 4 separate, I don't know, is that quadruple hung? I will have
louvered. Yeah.
Louvered, thank you. So it appears as though they've been treated as almost one building for some time now, because these also have the same louvered windows, and the present day condition, they all have windows that appear to have been changed out at about the same time. So clearly one owner's done work on both buildings throughout time. That's the gist of the proposal. John summarized a lot of it too, so I don't need to get too far in. The planning and zoning issues are pretty easy. Glazing, they're replacing windows, they're changing windows, they're required to bring it up to code, which is 70% glazing with clear 80% VLT glass. They have submitted the glazing calculations, which show, and again, I'm keeping the buildings separate specifically. They show 75% glazing on the Wooster build, the Parks building, and 76% glazing on the Wooster building. So they definitely meet the glazing requirements. I haven't gotten glass specs yet, though, so I asked them to submit that in our conditions of approval. Also, again, similarly, we just did 2 of them. They're the canopies and on both buildings projecting to the right of way. So we need this board. The dimensions are all good and they do not interfere with streetscape. So the last thing they would need is for this board to approve the projections if this board so chooses. So we'll need to discuss that at some point. And also, finally, there's some, well, not finally, I did this earlier, so I'm getting ahead of myself. There's going to be some new screening elements. So on the rooftop, they're going to have some new rooftop units. I've been advised that they are going to be very low profile, high efficiency. I'll let Victor let you know the exact verbiage, but you know, very low impact, but they're still proposing to screen them from public view. I'll need some information on those rooftop units and what they plan to screen it with. There's also going to be a new dumpster proposed in the back, which is again proposed to be screened. I just didn't have any details on that, and I'm asking for that from the applicant before any building permits could be approved. Lastly, I just wanted to make sure we at least talked about it, that there's a specific use requirement in this area. It's the Red Line Retail District. So a retail use has to be on the first floor, and it appears as though they're definitely going with retail on that first floor, which is a combined first floor, again, I'll emphasize. And they've always been allowed an office on the second floor, so they're proposing to keep that. So they meet the standards of the Red Line Retail District. As far as signage, I noted that you saw in some of the exterior elevations that there's a sign that reads the Boji Group on the Wooster building. I haven't been given any dimensions. Well, maybe I have, excuse me. I just glitched out of here. So they've given some dimensions, but to be honest with you, I did not see those at the time, so I did not review them, but I think it's quite obvious that it's within the square footage allowance of that particular building. Whether or not we move forward with that tonight or have them go administratively is another thing. So my apologies on that miss. But there's also some areas for signage proposed in the future on the Parks building that you can see here in these dotted boxes. 3 in particular. Again, well, in this case, there really is no dimensions, although there's a significant frontage, so I imagine that will be within the sign ordinance, but I'm sure they'll come back at a later time, and if it's able to be approved administratively, that's great. But I did mention that, you know, this board often likes approving sign plans, so if you were to want to tonight approve this as a sign plan, I could make sure to have them adhere to that over time as a sign plan. Moving on to what I'd call the nitty-gritty, if you will, the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation, which much of the stuff kind of still applies, even though we're not talking about a late 1800s facade anymore, unfortunately, at least on the Parks. We are talking about a mid-century facade. Well, we still feel the planning division, that is, generally meets the Secretary of the Interior standards 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 9. However, we did notice certain elements of the proposal that may conflict with 1, 2, 7, and 9 as well. I'll try and paraphrase for us here so that I don't go on reading things verbatim. Just pull up that rendering again so I can reference it. So standard number 1 has to do with use and historical uses. Over time, you know, as you read through in the historical descriptions, this was a retail use on the first floor. They formerly had apartments on the second floors, but over time it changed to an office. But importantly, that retail use on the first floor is proposed to remain. However, there is what we view as a bit of an issue in the Wooster building, in that the only door that's going to be proposed now, let's see if I can find, yes. This door here, which kind of exists in the general same place, it only gives access to the second floor. So if we are considering these buildings separate, as we are in our historical files, essentially this design eliminates the retail access that this building has had for over a century at this point. So we feel that may be inappropriate in terms of design. Standard number 2, we feel that there, even though it's not the character we expected, there is still some character there that's planned to be maintained, and that the original bricks, the massing, the shape, all of that's again planned to be restored and maintained by removing that, what I call, in my own words, was an inappropriate facade treatment back in '69 when they put the travertine. So the only issues that we found there, well, that I noted in the report, I should say, the retail entry we thought was a big feature of that building. So overall, I think that's probably an issue. Second, I did note that they're proposing to replace the windows. I had some questions originally about the potential originality of those windows. I have since been to that building and looked at the windows, and I now know that those are absolutely not original windows or even close. So their proposal to replace them is actually more appropriate than not in this case. So you can kind of disregard that final comment on standard 2. Standard 3, about adding false or conjectural historical features. We note that these buildings have been pretty well documented over time. You know, it's Main and Main in downtown Birmingham. The Birmingham Museum had given the applicant several pictures before this, and there's several that are available online as well that show the buildings as they were over time. The only thing that we note here that is actually consistent with the last review we did was that canopy system on the Parks building. When it was the 1880s facade, I felt that maybe that was inappropriate then. I still kept it in there because, you know, structural steel canopies weren't necessarily a feature of now mid-century buildings that I observed. So that may add a false sense of historical context to a layperson that may be inappropriate. Number 4. So basically, this is the quandary about whether we keep the travertine that was on the building when the building was designated, or we go back to the mid-century facade that is arguably more beautiful and important. And again, those are my words. I had mentioned in my report that you know, juggling both options, we feel as though, and we, again, the planning division, feel as though the mid-century facade is more important and closer to the period of significance for downtown than the travertine facade is with the big ugly mansard. I'll say it. It's ugly. So we feel that mid-century facade is more significant in general. So that's why we feel that they meet standard number 4. Standard 5. The Parks building, again, distinct features, the shape, the window openings, they're all proposed to be maintained. As John mentioned, he has some trepidations about the first floor storefront. He is arguing, it sounds like, that based on the historic photo that we have of the mid-century building, that shape, that's the storefront is actually proposed to be altered, which may conflict with number 5. But other than that, in general, the applicant's proposing to maintain the historic integrity in that regard. Even as far as, if you recall, previously in November, they were originally proposing to actually bring back the clock that was here up at the top. In discussions, we kind of agreed to leave that out. We didn't want to remove any of this brick that's there now that has gained historical significance over time to re-add a clock that is historical but would be new material. So they're now keeping that what I'll call a basic flat parapet, which is appropriate in our opinion. Whew. Number 6. So essentially, again, summarizing, there are plenty of punctures in the brick, but they are proposing to rehabilitate the brick, which they have advised us should actually be easier because it's a more modern brick and the brick color is very uniform. So there wouldn't be they're not planning to have very many issues with obvious patches. The mortar is very clean, so it should be very easy to bring that back to its former glory, if you will. So, but they will still need to replace brick. In this case, it's appropriate because the brick is damaged and you don't want to have holes all over your building. Other than that, they're proposing to keep all the other brick and the limestone bands. 7, which is a new one, it basically says that, inappropriate facade treatments like sandblasting or power washing could irreparably damage the facade. As I mentioned, there's paint right now on the Wooster building in the bakehouse space, pretty much up to that limestone band that's showing here. So pretty much up to here. I have been advised that they plan to use and I'll let Victor describe it in more detail, but more of a chemical based that they kind of apply, wash off, that's much less abrasive. So it shouldn't damage the brick, which meets standard number 7. And finally, number 9, we think that all these changes are definitely intended to restore the building and that there are no new additions that have to be differentiated. But we want to make sure that everything is focused on repair. We want to highlight that it should be a repair first mindset as opposed to replace. Much of what they're doing is indeed that. So we aren't so worried about number 9. We think they meet the standards pretty well. So I've talked a bit too much. So I think I'll just finish with, we did recommend that the HDC approve the design review application for 100 and 136 North Old Woodward, the Parks and Wooster buildings. Again, I'm keeping them separate. It's important to keep them separate. They're separately designated and all that. There were 3 conditions. 1, I need specification sheets for all the new glass, all the new windows and glass. 2, the applicant does need approval from this board if you choose to do so for the projections into the right-of-way, which is just the canopies. And 3, we need details on all screening. That includes the RTUs and the dumpsters. So I've got lots of plans, lots of renderings. If anyone wants me to pull up any sheets to reference, please let me know. I will do so. Victor, if it comes to it, if you've got set and you think it'd be easier for you to run through it, I'd be happy to make you a co-host. I think I trust you with that responsibility. So I've just made you a co-host, Victor, if you find it easier to.
Actually, Nick, if you don't mind, you shouldn't trust me, but if you could trust my son Alex to be a co-host, that'll be more important.
Okay, I can do that as well. But again, I'm open to sharing if need be.
Thank you.
So yeah, John?
With that, now I've certainly said my piece with respect to this building. Questions or comments from my other commissioners? Keith?
Nick, or Victor, I just had one question. In your write-up, you referred to this as phase 1. Do we have any idea what phase 2 is?
Yeah, I'll summarize it. It's essentially, sorry, Victor, and he'll be able to
go ahead, please.
Phase 1 involves the Wooster and Parks building, and phase 2, as I understand it, will involve the Tiger and Boyd spaces to the east on Maple.
Demolition and then building a 4-story building, or what?
Go ahead.
It would be what I call a 2.5-story building. Basically, there's 2 full floors, and then a partial 3rd floor that is set back. There would be a rooftop terrace. We had shown you, if you remember, Keith, some previous renderings of just the massing and what it could look like, and probably like an active rooftop as well. That would be used for Ron Boji and his offices up on the 2nd floor. So that would be a later phase. And we will be prepared to bring that to you after we, Ron is right now is very, very close to signing a very important lease for this ground floor retail tenant. It is a national brand that would be very impressive for Birmingham. We can't say what it is now, but they will occupy the entire 1st floor of the Parks building and the Wooster building. And Ron's offices are on the 2nd floor, proposed to be on the 2nd floor. He'll occupy the entire 2nd floor. And then at a later date, we would come to you, and we would actually be coming to the planning board, I believe, first, because the Tiger Building and the Boyd Building do not have a historic designation, but they are in the historic district. So I believe we would go to the planning board first, since these two buildings would come down, and then a new building would be built, and we would be coming to you because we'd be in the historic district. So you would still see that.
My other question, Victor, was, is there a plan B for the canopies?
Maybe. And I am prepared to talk about that. And that's why if Nick does give us the, I know that well, you want me to just go ahead and start? Yes, there could be a plan B, and I can share with you what could be a plan B, if that's okay. But I'd like to just maybe talk in general, then come to that, if that's okay, Keith.
Natalia?
Commissioner comments first, and then we'll go to you, Victor.
Right.
Is that right, John?
I prefer to do that way.
I am. Oh, okay.
Go ahead,
Okay.
Natalia.
So I am excited to get rid of the travertine. I'm with you, Nick, on that. And restoring now the mid-century building. I would really like to see the plan B on the canopies, because as they are right now, I don't think that they are appropriate. And one other issue that maybe you can address while you're talking about the project is the issue of the second door that's being eliminated on the Wooster building. I agree with Nick that that seems to change of what that separate building is. And also, frankly, even if it is one tenant on that first retail floor, it seems like that one entrance would be very far away. So it would seem to be appropriate to me to keep the two doors. Those are the only two issues that I find that maybe I would like to hear addressed.
Okay, sure.
Michael?
Thank you. This is an historic building, and I know that the date of history seemed to be a bit of a moving target, but I don't think 2021 is one of those choices. And whereas I really like the design, I think that we either go to the travertine building, put it back together like it was when it was designated historic, or do the mid-century modern version. And I don't think that means transom windows, and I don't think it means canopies, and I'm not sure about other details of windows and so forth. In the Wooster building, it also looks like it's been modified, but I can't really tell how it's been modified. So I don't know if that's attempting to be the 1880s version or the 1960s version, but it's not either one. And I think even though I might prefer this design over what would be historic, I think we'd be remiss in our duties if we approved a non-historic solution. My thought.
Okay.
Thanks, Michael. Dustin?
Michael, I think that you said that really well. That's, I think, how I'm feeling. And just looking at the buildings, it seems like we're losing the character of downtown a bit. And I understand that it needs to change over time. But looking at, I walk by that with my family every day. And it's going from two buildings to one, it feels like. And I'd be curious to hear from the board as well, if there's precedent for combining the first story on two historical buildings or two buildings in the historical district. And if there are thoughts on that.
Just to answer your question before you go, actually, yes. And it's right across the street, almost a mirror image in the Ford and Airdy and Nixon buildings. The Starbucks building and the former Grab Green building. They're completely combined on the second floor, and there is a first floor tenant space that's combined, although it's not fully combined. And I haven't been able to look back far enough with the time that I had to understand why. But that's the only one I can think of.
Okay.
Yeah, I think those are my comments. And if anybody on the board has comments on that, I'd really like to hear them.
Anyone else? Natalia?
Well, I guess in response to Dustin, I agree with you, and maybe I didn't word my comments. I worded them only regarding the door. I have no issue of combining the retail space, but I agree with you that I would like to preserve the look of the two buildings separate. And if at a future point they wanted to separate them back into two distinct buildings, they can. So I agree with you, Dustin, completely.
I as well. I agree with both of you. I would like to maintain them at least visually as two separate buildings.
And they really are two separate buildings now with what we're faced with. We have a mid-century design on the
Right, but I mean with the door with.
Right. The door being eliminated, I think that's an issue for all of us. It seems to be an issue for all of us, and rightly so, because that is a separate building. Certainly will present itself as a separate building. There's certainly, and Nick, to your point, across the street, but even to that, the storefront entrances have remained separate. They have not been altered.
Well, and I think that that's important to the walkability of downtown, to be able to go to two stores rather than just one really large store.
Right. Right.
Nick, do you have any old pictures of the Wooster building?
Not handy, but if
Which old ones, Keith? We have several. There's only one from the 1960s that we've been able to find.
Well, the Wooster building, if you allow us to pull it up, Alex can pull up a picture from 1914. I think it'd be worth looking at.
Okay, it'd be easier than what I had planned. So
yeah. So if you see this picture of the Wooster building, you will see it actually has one entry where we are proposing our entry. That's the entry up to the second floor. And there was actually a side entry in that recess that took you into the retail space because it was like a recessed vestibule. And there was one storefront facade in the Wooster building, and it had the transom windows and the big awning. And you'll also see that there is a brick pier that has been removed. Do you see the brick pier that forms right there, that forms the entryway, that vestibule sort of entryway that took you up to the second floor? That pier is now gone. And in fact, you can see this image has the Chippendale top, although in this image, we don't see the clock. In another image, we do, but this is the best image that shows that actually this building had one recess, and it had an entry to go up to the second floor in the recess, as we're proposing, and an entry when you walked in to the left. Would be a door that took you into the retail space, which, by the way, we could still do. And we can still do a second recessed entry where it currently is today. It's not a deal breaker for our tenant. Our tenant proposes that they would really just use the main entry at the corner. And it is 100% our approach that these are two different buildings, and the way we approach these buildings, whether it was the late 1800s of the Parks building or the mid-century look, that's going to be its own identity. And the Wooster building has its own identity. So we're definitely not trying to marry the two. There are different bricks, different architecture, different storefronts. One is a wood storefront in the Wooster building. It's a steel storefront in the Parks building. So, I mean, there is definitely some distinct differences.
Would that also, if you added that entrance, provide you an emergency exit?
There would be enough exits, Keith, but yes, it would be another emergency exit, totally. But there was enough exits on the back. But, you know, again, we're here to have a discussion today. We're not drawing a hard line in the sand. You know, I think we have realized that we don't have this beautiful turn of the century facade from the late 1800s. Was it a little disappointing? Yes. But now we know what we're dealing with. And so we all agreed to do what we discussed several months ago, in that we would do and carefully remove the travertine panels, and we've numbered them. And in fact, Nick could even tell you, he's taken pictures of it. We've laid them out in the floor of the Parks building, all numbered and very carefully removed by a experienced contractor. And we understand how they were anchored, the condition of those panels. Quite frankly, the anchoring system is deteriorating. It's, if you were to say to leave the travertine panel, there would be a tremendous amount of repair even in the travertine panels, because the way they have been anchored has deteriorated over the years. So there's work ahead of us in either scenario. I think from our perspective and from Ron Bogi's and our whole team, and I know Ron is on, and if he wants to say anything, he can too. I think while we were most excited about the turn of the century facade, that has, for some reason, been completely removed. Nick doesn't have any notes or minutes or images of why it was removed. The brick pilasters was removed, all of the corbelling at the top, the pigeonholes, the stone detailing was removed, and it was maybe somebody's attempt to maybe modernize the building before we had the standards of the historic district. And so while it was an attempt to be and I'll be kind to John because he's an expert in mid-century design, while it was an attempt to make it a mid-century modern building, and that's the vintage. And we don't know if it was done in the 40s, the 50s. The last photo we have of the Parks building was an image of the parade shot where there was automobiles, and we see still the historic image, and it was probably maybe in the 30s. It was a parade that could have been in the 30s. Alex, I don't know if you want to pull that image up. Maybe it was the 20s, but sometime between then and 1967 or 69, we know that facade was completely removed and replaced with this newer brick. This is the latest photo we have. This is probably, what is it, from the 20s? I'm not an automobile expert, but somebody might know the vintage of those automobiles. But we can still see the historic Parks building. And then later, after we saw what we discovered on the removal of the travertine panels, we now have studied these additional images, and we found the one image that shows the mid-century look. Now, unfortunately, well, I should say, let me say it this way. I feel like we've got a building that is a little bit of a hybrid. Yes, it has a mid-century influence, but it still follows the massing of the original building. The placement of the windows at the second floor is certainly as the original building. The placement of the windows on the first floor are essentially the same as the original building, but they lowered the head of those windows. And they lowered the head of those windows to 8 feet. Whereas when we go in the inside of the Parks building, and Nick has got pictures of it as well, we can see where the lintels, the steel headers and lintels were when the building had transoms. And the ceilings in that space are at 12 feet. And this ceiling is at 11 foot, 11 and a half inches, and the steel is right at that point. And you can see the block has been infilled. That is a newer block, and then there's a beam under there at 8 feet. So they lowered those windows almost 4 feet. There you see the original lintels, and you can see where some of the original brick was, and then they filled it in with block. And this is by the way, that was the travertine panels laid on the ground. Here's some other lintels introduced at different heights, but they've lowered everything from essentially what was almost 12-foot window heads to 8-foot window heads. From our perspective, looking at the building, we accept that it's the mid-century look, and that we accept that we will do what we can to repair the brick of the mid-century look. We were hoping if we could, to raise the window heads, if you were so inclined to allow us to do that, to what we had shown was 11 feet, or maybe even 10 feet. To have window heads on this important corner on this building at 8 feet is a little bit frustrating and a little bit of a shame in a way, because here you have an important building on the corner. Historically, the windows were at 12 feet. It opened up the space. It's ideal for a retailer. It's part of what we do as architects urbanistically. Michael would agree with us. I think, just as architects, we wouldn't have windows at 8 feet when we have a 12-foot ceiling on an important storefront. We would want the windows to be high, to see in. Urbanistically, it's the right thing to do. The master plan, even in Birmingham, talks about high storefronts, high glass. The fact that we would have some type of awnings, whether it's what we're proposing or a version of an awning, gives it pedestrian scale. It gives identity to the storefront. It gives weather protection for shoppers and people and pedestrians. So we think those are all good things. Now, actually, Alex, if you don't mind pulling up the mid-century picture that's got the cars from the 60s. I would like to just point out a few observations. They lowered the brick. They've added 4 more feet of brick and lowered those window heads to 8 feet. And you can see how low that awning, that swung fabric awning comes. That awning's probably 6.5 feet above the ground. And the window heads are at 8 feet. And by the way, from what we've learned so far, the brickwork at the top of the building, from the windows on the second floor windows up, the brickwork is in excellent condition because no travertine panels were adhered there. That was where the mansard roof was. So that brick is in very, very good condition. The brick that is in the worst condition is just above the window heads because there was attached right in that area. There was attachment of awnings, of signs, the travertine panels. That is where the brick, and if you walked by and you saw it, you probably could see it. There's holes, there's anchors, there's a fair amount of deterioration of that brick because of all of the anchors that were put in over the years. What we would hope to be able to do is fully restore the facade, but raise the window head. And if you're not a fan of the structural steel canopies, I don't think it's not written that a mid-century modern building has 8-foot high windows. There are many beautiful mid-century buildings that have taller windows. Transoms were probably a little more historic back when the building was done, and we don't see transoms as often in mid-century designs. But I do want to pull up a couple of examples because as we've kind of looked at this and continue to digest it, Alex, I want to pull up the first image that shows our design with the transoms and then the 8-foot window head as a comparison. And I'm using this opportunity tonight to be a little bit of a working session because I think that's what this is, what's going on here. And, we all want to come to the right conclusion and the best conclusion. So this is an example. This drawing reflects our proposal below, which shows canopies at 8 feet with transom windows above to 11 feet, not even to the 12 feet, to 11 feet. Whereas the scheme above shows the window heads at 8 feet. And you can see they've added 4 more feet of brick than what was there even originally. And even, we're not even proposing to go all the way up to 12 feet. We were proposing 11 feet. It's just when I look at this facade, it's a missed opportunity to have the windows on the ground floor so low and so much brick at the top. And I mean, that's what we have today. One of the thoughts is, can we be allowed to raise the lintel to 10 feet, go from 8 feet to 10 feet, and to remove, that's where the bricks are the most damaged. We would be removing the bricks that are the most damaged. And of course, there's no bricks remaining. I mean, we'd have to get new brick and match it as close as we can. We think we can get a fairly decent match. But if we are allowed to raise the brick to 10 feet, or I should say the window heads to 10 feet, we could take the remaining bricks that are good, because we would tooth them out very carefully. We would remove the mortar, and we could use those salvaged bricks to repair the other bricks of the facade, which we know would be a perfect match. So there's a practical solution to do something like that. By the way, in this elevation study, well, I'm not going to go to the Wooster. Let's go, Alex. I think we're still on the focused on the Parks building. Can we go to the next elevation where we raise the window heads to 10 feet? So here's another study where the bottom elevation is now new. The top elevation is the window heads at 8 feet. The bottom elevation, we've raised the window heads to 10 feet. There is not transom windows. Those are full pane windows that go all the way up, which would be very common in a mid-century building without transoms. And there may be a canopy, let's just call it a little bit of an eyebrow that would cantilever out. We could determine what the material is the most appropriate material for this building, and there would be no tiebacks. And it would be a solid canopy, it wouldn't be frosted glass. And in talking with Nick and just even talking with and looking at other examples, we did find other examples of mid-century buildings that had these sort of very modern, thin, low-profile canopies without tiebacks, without glass. And an example is right here in town, almost one to think about. Not that it's an ideal example compared to this, but it's the old Kresge building over on Maple. Now the furniture store, West Elm. And where that canopy comes out, but the windows are high. They're tall, single-pane windows. And then you've got the upper facade up above. That's a mid-century building, by the way, on that building. Sign bands would be proposed in the same area above the window heads and below the limestone belt line. And again, coming back to the second floor windows would all be new on the Parks building. And the second floor windows on the Wooster building would be new, because none of those are original, but we would be doing new windows. They would all be double hungs. And in the Parks building, in the Wooster building, we would be proposing a new wood storefront. And this wood storefront is different than the steel storefront of the mid-century building. It has more of a reminiscent look to a historic storefront because it's got mullioned windows. Those would be divided lights. It would have a limestone base. It would have one entry recessed. It would have some panels at the top of the windows. And we would propose one entry, and we would be very happy to put an entry door off to the left of that. That would be like a door into the storefront, like there was originally. And that we're thinking that this is a good direction to move into, if the board is inclined to allow us to do that. Just to talk about the other details, not that they're as important as everything we've discussed, the mechanical screening will comply with everything. In fact, we're going to put all new state-of-the-art HVAC system in for the entire building, both second floor and first floor. It will be what is called a VRF, variable refrigerant flow system. It is the state-of-the-art mechanical system being used today. The beauty of it is it is the most efficient. It's not the most inexpensive. It's actually an expensive system. But in terms of what is put on the roof, it is only small condensing units, actually smaller than air conditioning units that you see in a house. They're very lightweight. And then within the space, there are what is almost like VAV boxes, and allows you to zone it very easily and very comfortably. And they're very quiet. To be honest with you, I don't even think we'll need much screening at all, because the roof slopes to the back to the alley. And if you've been in that alley, it's not the prettiest image in the back. We would propose to clean it all up. There's a lot of sheet metal and duct work and just things that have been cobbled on over so many years on the back of this building, which we can clean up. There's rooftop units on low roofs, and then on the higher roofs, we would consolidate everything in one space. So it's nice and neat and clean, and will take us for the next 50 years. So that is what we would do with that. Obviously, we would provide all the glass and glazing specifications. that would be required. And we're just identifying a sign ban because we obviously would come back in with the tenant's signage once that tenant lease is formalized. And of course, you would see who that tenant is. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions. Open dialogue, but I wanted to show this latest elevation, and the one we would be proposing would be more like the bottom elevation, which I think for the most part preserves the mid-century building. But I think urbanistically, at least it gets us to get the glass a little bit higher instead of these low storefronts and low windows. Thank you.
Questions for Victor?
I very much like the idea of the taller windows and without the transoms. I do think that that looks mid-century, and I think that Victor is correct that the low 8-foot windows probably aren't appropriate for retail.
And Gigi, I will respectfully disagree with you for two reasons. First, the building is designated with the travertine has 8-foot windows. The building behind the travertine has 8-foot windows. Part of the agreement we made as the HDC with the Boji group, whatever was underneath was to remain if that's what they elected to do. To now alter the facade again changes the mid-century design that exists underneath the travertine. We're not building a new building. We're not altering a building that's not historic.
I understand. I just thought it was helpful to be able to use those bricks to get a better match.
These bricks will not be difficult to match. And the windows that exist, if it were to remain the travertine, are at 8 foot.
I don't think anybody wants it to remain the travertine.
Then, as I've said again, the windows are at 8 foot. The windows have been at 8 foot since at least the 60s. The design on the top of what's shown is a more appropriate and accurate mid-century design. I could cite 100 examples: Sears, Corvettes, Montgomery Wards, any Aero Saarinen building you can think of, any Eames building you can think of, any Minero Yamasaki building you can think of. The scale of such is the large facade with smaller first floor. The second proposed hybrid is, as Michael said, a 2021 design, not a 1960s design and not a 1880s design. Our purview is not to provide a more appropriate or more contemporary building to suit a retail tenant. It's to protect the building.
Point taken.
Questions or comments from other commissioners?
I guess I would like to know the 1887 brick. Is it underneath this? Is there like a brick that made it mid-century? What it changed?
No.
They changed the brick.
The brick has been removed,
The
unfortunately.
brick was completely removed, Patricia. What's there is brick that was done sometimes, as Victor said, and as best we can discern, somewhere between the 50s and 60s.
I'm disappointed, but I kind of agree. I get your point, and I agree with your point, but I also think that the design with the larger windows looks better. But I get what you're saying, that we shouldn't mess with what was.
If I may make a comment, I am the owner of the building. This is Ron Boji. I have come into the city of Birmingham as a developer across the state of Michigan and in multiple states. And I've done numerous historical buildings, all under the historical preservation of SHPO, unlike, respectfully, here in Birmingham, where it's not under the guidance. It's under the guidance of the people that I am looking at and your board. And I want to be extremely conscientious and humble to this board. But I will make a few comments. To the chairman, Mr. Henke, your passion is very much understood to all of us. It would be an undersight to say that you do not have passion towards mid-century, and I respect that. But I want the board members to understand this. It's interesting to me where we have worked hand in hand with you, not asking for forgiveness, but asking for permission during this entire duration. Never once, and Nicholas can stop me if I'm incorrect, never once was the picture that I found and brought to the attention was ever presented to us. That mid-century picture was never brought in any of your initial meetings, nor in any of the historical items. So I'll pause there and say, Nicholas, am I correct?
I would say that's correct. I don't think when we originally asked the museum for photographs, I'm not sure. I am sure that that was not included. And that was pretty much the extent, because we were so focused on the 1800s facade that
absolutely,
even if the Birmingham Museum has that photo, we did not see it in November of 2020.
Exactly right. And we've looked and seen, and they do not have that photo. We brought the photo. So as Chairman Henke has mentioned on more than one occasion about making sure it stays the way it is with the travertine, what is there is a lintel that had 12-foot high windows. It is there. And everybody would know it would be impossible to have ever thought windows were still there, because you could have easily looked into the space from the inside. There were no windows. You could have looked from the outside and see there were no windows. So what is very intriguing to me, and this is a working session, because by no means, please, this is not ever an opportunity to go to a 5-story building. By no means. You can put it in a deed restriction that I would sign. We will never go to a 5-story building. So that's ever a thought to any of the board members. All we are trying to do is work with you in what truly is a hybrid situation. All due respect to the passion of the chairman and the mid-century style versus maybe a late 1800 style to then what was done over time in the travertine. If you look at the SHPO requirements, and we have investigated it thoroughly, all it states is if you tear back what you now have, and if you find that in turn, that product that is there is not what you thought it was, then make it to the best of your ability to match the aesthetics of the historical district and its neighboring buildings. And what Victor has shown does that. Does it lend towards a 2021 style for an urban retail look? Yes, it does. But it also facilitated that in the 1800s. Why someone in the mid-century decided to change it, I don't know. I'll stop there.
Mr. Bogie and Victor,
Yes,
would you both agree with me that the 1960s brick currently finishes at approximately 8 foot above grade?
Yes.
And then would you also agree with me that that's probably been there 60 years?
Well, we know it's been there at least since 69, right? So
So that any modification of that would be a modification of the historic facade from the 1960s.
yes. But John, can I add a footnote to that? I think we
Of
all
course.
know. Sure, thank you. I think we all know, though, because we have proof of it from our investigations inside and outside, and from the historic photos, that the original building did have 12-foot high windows.
But that was
Windows.
much before 1969.
I know, but I mean, I think.
And our discussions and agreement have always been either the Travertina's Mosley's with the existing windows, or what you would accept what was underneath. And what you're proposing is neither of those.
Well, I would say what we're proposing, I would say what we're proposing, and I'll use the same word, is a little bit of a hybrid and a very minor hybrid or deviation. We're restoring probably 90% of the facade. We're asking the window head to go up 2 feet. It's that simple. If you know, listen, this is a work session. We're talking about it.
Right.
We just, you know, you got a retail space that has 12-foot high windows. You had a building that had 12-foot high. You had a retail space that had 12-foot ceilings. You had windows that were almost 12 feet historically. Obviously, sometime in the mid-century, they lowered it down to 8 feet for whatever reason. But I would say the mid-century look does not mean only low windows. There was just no transoms in our research. They did have mid-century buildings. And in fact, many of the architects you talked about, Saarinen and Yamasaki and all these people, they had very grand first floor facades that had tall windows. But yes, the buildings were much simpler. They were not ordained with a lot of detail. I mean, that's just, you know, the part of the modern movement of what happened in architecture.
And I completely agree with you. But this particular building, which is what we're faced with, had the 8-foot windows, at least when it was, for lack of a better word,
mid-century building,
redesigned as a mid-century building.
That's a true statement. We're not denying that.
So my concern is, and this goes to the Secretary of Interior, that we are altering the facade of the building. That is my concern. And what happens in that particular instance is, if we allow you to do this, I can think of at least 2 instances right now that have come before us, that will undoubtedly come before us again and say to us, you allowed them to do this, now you have to allow us to do this as well. And granted, we have the ability as this board to say no, because each building is to be taken on its own and stand on its own. But you know, and I know that in this particular city, the precedential decisions, even though they are not, are placed in front of us often. And in this particular instance, my concern is if we allow you to change the window openings, height-wise, width-wise, that this would exacerbate the issues with other historical buildings in the city. Natalia?
So since this is a working session, if I may introduce this idea. At no point of time, we can all agree, did this building have 10-foot windows. At a certain point of time, it had 12-foot windows, and at a certain point of time, it has now 8-foot windows. I can see an argument being made that we're talking about not a redesign of a historic building, but of a restoration. I can conceivably see an argument for restoring the original windows to 12 feet, perhaps. I can see the argument there of restoring the building to what once was. I do have a hard time not restoring it, but creating another window opening that has never been there. Does that make sense?
If I could just maybe mention, Natalia, I think our approach in going with the 10-foot windows was still trying to keep it in the spirit of the mid-century design without the transoms and just a very tall, simple window and maybe an eyebrow at the top of it. That was where we moved to in the 10-foot scenario, still being as respectful as we can to the mid-century design and just allowing us to raise the window head. That was really our approach.
Keith?
Victor, I guess let's go back to the 12-foot windows. I didn't quite understand looking at the picture. You're saying that originally, when the building was first built, there were 12-foot windows?
Just under 12 feet. It probably was around 11.8 because we see the windows. We can see where the steel lintels were. And when you look at the historical photos, Alex, maybe pull up one of the historical photos, if you would please, either the two butcher shop or the
the two butcher shop is probably the best example of what was 12 feet.
Okay, yeah, we call it the two butcher shop because we got two butchers standing in the front. But here you could see that there was a limestone header, and there was what would have been like 8-foot tall doors. And where the steel is, the floors vary a little bit in the building, but the lintels are at about the original steel lintels are at about 11'8", and we know the ceiling was at 12, so it was just under the original ceiling height, and that would have been fairly common. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, what I was mentally searching for, John, is to find some middle ground that restores the building in a manner that SHPO would appreciate without, I mean, for example, if that header was never there, going to 10 feet would be totally unacceptable. 8 feet, it evolved over time. So, I was trying to think about how, if we wanted something different than 8 feet, how we would approach that with SHPO and what the logic would be of any discussion that we'd have with them. And the only thing I can think of is if you go way back, it's, I don't know, Victor said 11'8", they're currently 8 foot, so what does restoration really mean? I appreciate, John, your point. I don't have a real strong opinion about this, quite honestly. But I think to Ronnie's point, they've tried to be accommodating. So it's kind of important to find some solution that we can all agree to. And I'm not sure what that is, but I mean, that's why I was asking the question.
I've asked Nick to reach out to SHPO to give us some guidance with respect to this. And we haven't gotten much back yet. So I'm still trying to dive into that. My concern, beyond what I've already articulated, is, again, the building as a mid-century building had 8-foot windows. The building as designated in 1969 by our predecessor commission has 8-foot windows. The interior of Secretary of Interior standards with respect to this charges us to make sure that there is minimal change in the defining characteristics of the building. I don't know if that gives us enough latitude to raise the windows 2 feet or raise the windows 4 feet without changing the design of the building significantly enough that we're now in violation of our charter in doing that. I'd hope to get an answer with respect to that. I certainly appreciate the need for retail, but again, I'm pretty adamant with respect to the agreement that was discussed ad nauseum between the Boji Group and Victor and the city when we did this was you either got the travertine or you got what was underneath. If they want what was underneath, it's an 8-foot transom. Now, that's not to say if we or Nick can get some guidance from SHPO that says, Mr. Henke, we agree with you, but we think there's enough latitude for you to discuss with the building owner and the architects raising that. I'm open to that discussion, but what's in front of us has been that we have to date is 8 feet on the windows. And then, and I'm only speaking as to the Parks building. The Wooster building, I think, needs to stand on its own as it is. We know that's historic. I think, Victor, we could decide on 2 doors or 1 door and the access points, regardless of how the buildings are combined. And that building, I think, is the easier of the 2 to work through how that's approved. Nick?
Well, you know, in that vein, John, I was thinking about, we've agreed, I think, that it's, you know, a mid-century. We've agreed on the brick. We've agreed on, you know, where the main entrance is. We've agreed on the upper floor. You know, we've agreed that the Wooster building needs to stand alone. We've agreed the Wooster building needs to have a first floor entrance so that at some point, you know, down the road, you know, it would be similar to what it was in the past. We've kind of agreed we're not doing transoms. We've agreed there's some kind of plan B with a canopy. And I think the only issue that we're struggling with right now is the window height. And I think getting SHPO to weigh in would give us probably enough insight to arrive at a conclusion.
I agree with you on all but one point, Keith. The canopy, okay. and Victor, I agree with you that the Kresge building / Harmony House building is a classic mid-century design. However, it's a much different mid-century classic design than what the Parks building is. The Parks building is the more minimal, large facade, you know, attention to the large facade and the entrances as opposed to that building, which had the wraparound canopy. That's not to say that I don't think there's something that's appropriate that could be called out, but this particular building, as it stands based on the photo that we've got from the 1960s, is that very strong flat facade, not to be broken up with canopies.
Well, but again, I think
my opinion, and I've certainly got, you know, like I said, Keith, and I'll date myself along with a lot of the commissioners. Think of the old Corvette stores. Think of the old Sears Roebuck stores. I think particularly the one in Highland Park. Low first floor, 4 stories, all flat facade. Montgomery Ward's first floor windows, 4 stories, all flat facade. I could name a dozen of those types of examples, and that's what this building is.
Well, my only comment, John, is if we get SHPO to weigh in on the window height, I think that'll help us get to where we'd all like to be, wherever that is. And then from that, whatever awnings or canopies may be appropriate, you know, would probably be easier to get to also. So, I mean, to me, I guess we need to try to get SHPO to weigh in on this discussion.
I agree.
So I can actually, I think I could solve that right now in that, in speaking with SHPO on previous projects, they are actually not allowed to weigh in on the merits of a specific proposal, because as you know, in the event that any HDC proposal were to be denied, there is an appeal process that goes to the SHPO. So it would be inappropriate for them to give any advice to us on the specific merits of a design of a specific project.
Right. They can give us guidance, but they can't give us a decision.
Yeah. And in general, the guidance is whatever you decide. And in general, this is what protects you from the next door neighbor coming to you and saying, give me the same thing. Whatever you decide, it has to be defensible. And defensible is the key word. We have to use the standards. We have to use our city code. And we have to, you know, no subjectivity, nothing. It's defensible, use the ordinance, use the code, and that's what it is. The easy example, totally arbitrary, hypothetical. We could talk about the canopies. If you were to approve the canopies, you could justify it as those are removable features. You know, you're allowed to even have additions to buildings as long as if they're removed, they do not significantly alter the historic storefront. So that's an arbitrary example. You know, it's one standard, but in general, you have to be able to justify your decision based on the standards and our city code. That's all the
My
direction.
point is, with respect to this, canopies are inappropriate for this building as it was modified into a mid-century design.
Yeah, and that's up for all, of course, it's up to you all to
But
decide.
that's, I'm one of 7 of us. That's my opinion. Is it a strong one? Yes, it absolutely is.
John, can I
Victor?
say thank you?
Sure.
Well, first of all, I just want to say, just respectfully, when we were here in November and we said we had agreed to remove the travertine, quite frankly, and we said we were going to, try to live with what was underneath, we thought we were going to see the original facade, quite frankly. We didn't expect to later discover the original facade was removed and a mid-century facade was put on, and that there was 8-foot window heads. So yeah, we sort of said we were going to take the steps, and it took us all by surprise, quite frankly. And then later we discovered a photo that shows exactly what we've got. That's 1960s photo. Again, I would say, as with my experience in the work we've done as on historic buildings, is if we were to add something, it could be removed and put back. If we are to repair the brickwork and have to replace bricks, we're going to repair a lot of the bricks above those window heads. So we're going to be putting new bricks in. We're not going to leave bricks with holes in them. We're going to be having to put new bricks in. And there's probably a lot of them that we're going to have to put in. If we're permitted to raise the bricks or raise the window heads, we can salvage that brick and reuse it. So we're restoring and repairing the other holes in the building with the original brick. There's a benefit to that, I think, just intrinsic and just naturally to say we're going to reuse some of those bricks. And I'm going to even go a little further. I'm going to say in 40 years, when I'm not around, and Ron and his daughters have this building, and they say, Dad, we're going to lower the window heads to 8 feet. They could take the glass out and lower the window heads to 8 feet, and they will get new bricks to match the bricks that are there. I mean, you can, whatever we do does not forever remove it.
Here's the difference in your argument, Victor. Historic restoration versus alteration. To put in the brick is a historic restoration. To repair the existing brick and tooth in what needs to be is a historic restoration.
Yes.
To cut it all out so that it's not there anymore is an alteration.
Okay. Well,
Michael?
I think this is a very complicated project, and a very complicated process. But that said, all historic restoration that I've either been involved with or been familiar with, you restore the original building. You can add on to it. You can, actually, there's a lot of leeway on the sides and the backs, but in the front facades, the goal is to restore it. And all the rules that I'm aware of call for that. Given that this was designated an historic building, probably for the wrong reasons, I think there could be some wiggle room here. I think that to just modify if it's decided that the building to restore is the mid-century modern building, then I would be inclined to think that we need to follow all the rules of restoration. If you wanted to restore the 1880s building, then I think you would, again, follow all the rules of restoration. I would think, Nick, in terms of your comment that SHPO is not going to make a decision, I think is fine, but I think they might be able to give us some guidance given the complication of the various, quote, historic designations, unquote. Because I think actually, Victor, I like your original design better than the mid-century modern. I like your 10-foot high design better than mid-century modern. But my perspective is, I think we really need to respect the charge that we are given. Which, so it's kind of like, okay, you pick the year, and you know, if the Wooster building's going to be in 1880, I think, great. Go to one door, put the brick pier back, or the column, maybe it is. You know, that's all fine. But I don't think we can just kind of make up stuff. And even though the made up stuff is better than what reality presents us. So those are my 2 cents. I think it would be great to get some outside advice. And I don't know how that would happen, but I would see it being publicly. I don't see, you know, having a secret meeting with the SHPO or something, if that's the right organization, you know, as opposed
I'm sorry. Thank you, Michael. Those are good comments, and maybe we should get a little more direction from SHPO. At the same time, we and Ronnie Boji especially has used Christine Kirdorf, who is a preservationist, and she does a lot of historical work with SHPO. We will reach out to her too and get some advice from her, and maybe bring her into this discussion about appropriateness and the appropriate moves. Ron, do you agree? I just saw you sent an email to Christine.
Yes, and you know what? I'll save my comments. Less is more on this, but because we were so forthright in the beginning and working so well with you in the beginning, but Christine is a specialist and she has extreme relationships with SHPO. This has already been seen by SHPO, so I already know they're off the record comments they're gonna make. But if you would like us to reach out to them, if Nicholas wants to reach out to them, we already know what their answers are going to be. And it's what Victor is proposing, because it's truly not mid-century nor the 1855s. It's a hybrid. But we'll go through the proper routine to show. Like Victor has said multiple times, this is a working session. We want to work with you. I think we've shown that, and thank you, Keith. I think you mentioned it yourself. We have shown that all the way through, and we'll continue to do that.
Yeah, I mean, John, I think the reason this is important, 2 things. One, the location at, you know, Main and Main, literally. I mean, it's the centerpiece of Birmingham. And number 2, I don't think anyone really wants the travertine back. I certainly don't. So trying to work together to find a common solution that makes sense, and more importantly, as you and Nick said, is defensible. I mean, to do something that sets a precedent that we then have to listen to, you know, people coming back for the next 20 years, using this as an example of why they should change their building, you know, is clearly inappropriate. I mean, whatever we decide to do has to have a good basis so that, you know, we can document it. And if someone wants to litigate, they can, but at least we'll have documentation. And I'm talking about, you know, Ronnie, you know, enabling legal issues. I'm talking about other people and other buildings in town.
Thank you, Mr. Day.
Other questions or comments? So I have one, Mr. Boji.
Yes, Chairman Henke.
You offered, as part of the discussion tonight, that you would put in a deed restriction that you would not go 5 stories. Would you put in the deed restriction that whatever the outcome of any approval of this building is, it remains historic?
I do not understand your question.
The building is currently designated historic. I have repeatedly made it clear to both you and Mr. Soroki that I am concerned that somewhere down the road, be it you, be it your daughter, be it your heirs, be it someone else who buys this building, after whatever we do, because it is no longer the Travertine, there will be an attempt to de-designate the building.
What I can say to you is this, and I know John Hindu as my attorney is on the line. So this is by no means.
And I know your attorney well.
By no means is this concrete 100%, but my word is more important than anything else, as my father has instilled upon me. That if we can work together, and that's largely driven by more than 8-foot-high windows. If we can work together for a hybrid situation on this main building, everybody I know knows, but I want to say it. When I put my name, Boji Group, this is our corporate headquarters. As you've seen, I have moved my corporate headquarters from our iconic Boji Tower building in downtown Lansing, across the street from the state capitol, that was built by Ari Olds in 1929. I have moved my corporate headquarters to Birmingham. I have my name on the building. I am going to make sure this is one of the most aesthetically appealing buildings, not only from the outside, but from the inside, showcased by the tenant we're about to announce very shortly. So long-winded, if we can work an agreement, by no means would I ever want to go more than what the current building is, and I would sign a deed restriction to not go 5 stories and to keep it in its historical facade.
I see.
Is that the same thing?
Didn't answer my question, but okay.
Is that the same thing?
It's not.
As not de-designating?
I don't think Ron. I think Ron did answer that. I think he meant. I think Ron, you correct me. I don't think he's trying to de-designate it.
No. I do not want to de-designate it. I want to continue having it designated as a historical building, if that is the exact question you're asking it, Chairman Hinkie.
Yes.
Okay.
Did that answer it, John?
That answers it. But my question is, will you put it in a deed restriction? If, no matter what happens, 8-foot windows, or if we're able to put some kind of hybrid solution to
No, I will not. No on 8-foot windows. No on 8-foot windows.
Okay. We know where the discussion's going to go then.
As passionate as you are for the mid-century and your expertise, and I respect it, is as passionate as I am as the owner of the building, that I do not feel it's made to be on Main and Main with those kind of windows. And I'm probably not saying it in the historical way of it. I'm saying it in a layman's term.
Nick, you got somebody that wants to make a comment, I see.
Yeah, John, you want to open up to John Hindu? If he still wants to comment.
Go ahead, John.
Good evening, everyone. John, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
We can.
So, John, the only comments I wanted to make is, as you know, everything is open for discussion. So your questions about a deed restriction not to go 5 stories or not is always open for discussion based on us coming to a mutual agreement on things you want and things we want, things that you and I have dealt with many, many times, and sometimes we've dealt with together. With respects to your comments about a deed restriction that this property will always remain historical, I think this building is specifically designated in your ordinance that it's going to be historical. It's written by address in there. So the only people that could change it is you, not us.
As I've said, John, my concern is because of the nature of the change of this building. The building was designated historic with the travertine. The hope was, obviously, that when the travertine was gone, we would be back to the 1880s building, and there would be even less of an issue as to its historical significance. There is, at this point in time, a lot of discussion with the preservation communities and the historical communities as to whether when mid-century sort of steps from great classic design, if you will, to historic design. And that's my concern is that, and it's not just, as I said to Ron and Victor when Nick and I spoke the first time, my concern is not just this building. It's the ripple effect of what we do with this building to the rest of downtown and the rest of the historical buildings downtown.
John, let me make this comment because I think I'm understanding maybe what you're saying. And let me ask you, and you can clarify if now I think I'm understanding what you're saying or what you're meaning by that comment. Is your comment that if after further discussion and research, this body determines that it is appropriate or agrees to have the windows be restored to the 1880 look of being 12 feet, and there's a logical basis for it because that was the original windows, would we agree that by you guys allowing that this building is still a historic building, and by you guys allowing that change, in no way is that deemed that this building is not historical anymore, and we agree to that? Is that what you're saying?
And I'm saying that any modification to the windows,
yes,
from the 8 foot, which has been there from when this building was designated, could potentially be a grounds for someone to try and de-designate this building.
Yes.
If we were to allow the 10 feet or 12 feet or any modification to the windows as it was designated. Now, that being said, if there's a defensible position for this board to say, we believe that the alterations that were proposed, that if we all vote on them and say, if it's 10 feet or 12 feet, no transom, and there's some other sort of hybrid that's a defensible protection of the building as a historical mid-century building, then I'm okay. But my concern, John, is any alterated, as I said to Victor, there's a difference between historic preservation and alteration. Our charter as the HDC is to preserve within the guidelines of the Secretary of Interior Standards 1 to 10. That's the defensible position we have to make. There is, as Nick said, and as we've said to you several times over the course of a number of buildings, if you don't like our decision, there is an appeal to SHPO. SHPO has the ability to overturn us, but maintain the historical integrity of the building.
Understood. I was just trying to clarify your comment about us agreeing that the building is still historical. And
that's what I want to, that's my point. At the end of all of this conversation, no matter what we approve, no matter how we work with you, and I think we will get to some kind of approval of the building, because I don't think any of us wants to go back to the travertine.
Agreed.
What I want to do is ensure that the building remains historical, that our decision is defensible, and that there aren't others in the city, and you know who they are as well as I do,
sure,
that will come to us and say, you allowed them to change, in Mr. Boji's terms, an iconic building with modifications and alterations that were not consistent with historic preservation. That's my concern.
Understood. And I think we can work with you on those points. I think we can work with you to so that it is defensible, it is justifiable, I think as we go through this and SHPO weighs in on it as we believe they're going to weigh in on it, you guys will discuss it further, and I can't speculate on what facts any other applicant may have other than to say, with respects to the windows, we are maintaining some historical integrity of this building because that is the 1880 look. So it is defensible, and we are keeping an element of a historic building all the way back from 1880. So I think we can help with that. I think, John, we can all discuss this further, and Victor, will be involved. And I think we can come to a solution working together. We're definitely going to get Christine Kidorf involved, and we'll get SHPO's comments back. But I think I agree with the word that everyone's been saying, which is hybrid. And it's not just a hybrid of keeping the 1960 historic and then making a 2021 alteration. The change in the windows that's being requested, although might be attractive in today's environment, is the 1880 window. So I think there's definitely everything we can discuss.
Okay, John, and that's where I guess I differ with you. And to Michael's point made very early on in the meeting, we're not 1880s anymore. We're either 1960s. You have to pick. You don't get the hybrid 1960 and 1880.
John, maybe I could jump in.
In my mind, you get 1960s.
Yeah, I think
so. We have to work within those confines, not 1880s windows in a 1960 building. Not 1960s building in an 1880 building. It's now, if we're going to discuss the building without the travertine, it's the mid-century 1960s and that design.
I think, John, we don't disagree with that. I think what John Hindu was referring to was just the fact that the 1880s building had taller window heads. We're not trying to replicate those windows, those transoms, or any of that, or those awnings. We would agree that if we're permitted to raise the window head and we determine what that appropriate height is, it would be done in the spirit of the mid-century modern aesthetic. Like
and Victor, and that's what I'm saying. If there's a defensible position for us as a commission,
yes, to
that alteration, then I think we have something to discuss.
Okay.
But if it goes beyond that, then I think it becomes much more difficult for us as a commission to defend our position, given the standards we have to adhere to. And then, as I said, ad nauseum, it puts us in a position where the next petitioner that's in front of us says, well, HTC, you let the main building do this, even though this is what you knew was there.
I think I understand, and the fact that we're even having this discussion right now, I think shows that we're moving to a defensible position and getting the proper people involved and all the dialogue we're having among ourselves.
Yep,
I think
I agree.
This is good.
So with that being said, do I have a motion to postpone this? Unless somebody feels strongly on approving or denying.
I'd like to move that we postpone.
I'll second that.
Any comment from the public on that motion?
Just Nick, if you don't mind. Gigi, just to ask, and maybe we can ask Victor and the applicant team as well. I believe our next meeting is June 2nd. Were you hoping to postpone to a date certain of June 2nd? And also, will Victor and the applicant team be ready? Or is there a different date? Or is it just an indefinite postponement? I'd like to clear that up.
Well, how long do you think it will take to get some kind of definition or a return conversation from SHPO if they have any guidance for us?
My suggestion would be to postpone to June 16th. I don't think we'll have an answer in a week in order to where we could get it renoticed, or 2 weeks.
Could I ask, and the date, it's better to be completely prepared when we come to you.
Yes,
Thank you very much. My request is a very simple request to enhance what we have already done. And I think I've heard this unanimously. I don't think there's one board member that wants to see the travertine stay. I'll look to anyone nodding against what I just stated.
nobody wants travertine.
I do though. I will say I think we need time to postpone to look at. We learned a lot of information tonight, and it may not be defensible for us to do anything. And I think we all agree that there is somewhere to go and defensible actions, but I don't think we can state an opinion on that.
And I'm with Dustin on that one. I think where you were going, Mr. Boji, is can I peel the rest of the building? And I think that's a no at this point in time.
Thank you for answering the question I had not asked yet.
Not my first rodeo.
I understand.
So to go back to my motion, should I have it not a date certain?
Well,
Victor, how much time do you think your team needs?
well, I think Ron's response is good. When we come back again, we want to have a defendable position. We want to have a design that we feel very comfortable with. I think certainly the 16th gives us enough time. Maybe the 2nd is not. I would say let us try for the 16th, and we'll be fully prepared. We'll have hopefully some information from SHPO. We'll certainly have Christine Kurdoff's, all of her recommendations. Maybe we'll even have her here with us.
Yes.
And we'll present to you a solid design for the way we would like to approach it. Obviously, we'll be talking to Nick along the way. I think you know where we want to go, and we'll also address the final details of the Wooster building and provide a second doorway, probably with still one recessed entry. Maybe we'll add that brick pier back that was missing, that was removed, but to have, we think, one recess with a side door into the retail space. And then the other details, Nick, of the trash dumpster and all those things, those are easy things for us to get you that information.
May I ask this? Is this uncommon? I'm asking. If we have information between now and the 2nd, are we allowed to come back and show you things and almost have like another working session? Although not asking to go for a final verdict to the 16th? I don't want to do this in a vacuum. I would like your assistance all the way through, as I feel we have shown you. And Nicholas, I don't know, are we allowed to present things, I don't want to say off the record, but like a workshop? It's what we just did.
We're
John,
always
correct me if
allowed
I'm-
design review. We're always allowed advisory design review.
Okay.
Yeah, or we could schedule it on the 2nd and just postpone this again to the 16th.
We don't know enough information. All I'm making sure is that if we have some real good feedback over the next few days, and if we update our information, and then in turn having another working session on the 2nd, I'm just talking out loud about this. Are we allowed to come to you then? Now, we're not asking for
It's a notice. It's Mr. Boji, it's a noticing issue with the public noticing to have sufficient time to get it on the agenda.
Thank you.
But either way, if we, either option A, if we postpone to a date certain of June 2nd, we come, we talk about it, and it postpones again to a date certain in July. Those postponements to a date certain serve as that public notice, so we would not need to renotice each time. Or, I'm sorry to hijack it like this, but Gigi could postpone to a date certain of June 16th and you are more than willing or more than able to come back at a discussion level. No action taken at the end of the meeting. The
I
second.
think that latter makes some sense. If we do the 16th, Ron, with as our formal meeting, but if we have enough information that we want to have another discussion, so we're all moving comfortably together on the 2nd, I think it's a good idea. Why wouldn't we want to do that? No action will be taken, but it's a
Because
work.
they have to have notice.
Well, I think we should.
No, we put it in the, if your motion is adjourn to a date, to the June 2nd date, and then as Nick said, if it becomes a study session or an advisory design, as opposed to a full design review, it can always be moved over to the 16th without another notice.
Or you could,
because the notice is made during a public meeting.
You could postpone it to a date certain of June 16th, and it has the same effect. Whenever you postpone to any date certain, that serves as the public notification.
Right, but we can come on the 2nd for a discussion.
That's right.
Right, but you would not be able to have a decision on the 2nd.
Right.
That's right.
That's okay. That's, like I said, we want to come to you when there's a vote that we feel it is a very solid amount of people, a majority, if not a unanimous, of what it's going to be versus wondering what that decision is going to be. So we'd rather take our time, i.e. the 16th, but we do want to have a working session with you on the 2nd on what we have found out. So Nicholas, whatever that takes, I hope Gigi and others will make that motion.
Okay, I'll try. I recommend that we postpone to a date certain of June 16th with the option of the petitioners returning for a study session before that meeting on June 2nd. Is that satisfactory?
That will work.
Okay.
Do I have a second for that
I
motion?
second that motion.
Okay.
Comment
on the motion?
Mike.
Was Mike. Lauren?
Gigi DeBrecht,
Aye.
Michael Willoughby,
Aye.
Keith Dyer,
Aye.
Natalia Dukas,
Aye.
John Henke,
Aye.
Dustin Colo,
Aye.
Patricia Lang.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for your time this evening, and we'll probably see you on the 2nd and certainly on the 16th.
Great. Thank you all.
Have a
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Nice evening.
Okay, so we're at that point, end of the meeting. I know that this isn't going to be as welcome as it usually is, but I do have some things to ask you all. At a pre-application level, I'll try to be quick. The first is, we're all familiar with 743 West Frank at this point.
Oh, yes, we are.
A couple of times. So, although I'm not sure why this wasn't a part of any of the other approvals, but they would like to paint, which makes sense. So I'm not sure why it was omitted the first time, but you can see the paint color they're choosing there on the left, kind of a cream color. They're proposing, to do white trim. Here you can see it on the right there, white trim. And they also, in their explorations, have noticed a lot of rotted boards, and they want to replace the siding on, I think, as I understood it, the whole house.
Oh, okay.
Let me just make sure here, but I think that it was damaged enough to where, if you take a few boards off, I don't know, I guess they just want to do the whole thing.
That would be a no.
So I guess you answered my question right there. I was gonna, just because they asked me to, wanted to get your opinion on admin versus design review, but of course, I'll bring this for design review based on those two comments there alone. And I will advise them, on all the standards and all the hoopla when it comes to replacing historic materials.
We've had two recent examples, Nick, one under your watch and one well before you with respect to stripping of siding.
Yep, it's dangerous business. So that's the first one. I can't see my tabs up here, so I'm just going to go look again. The second one is, do you all recall the Forefront building that came before us, a condo building that was being modified to the apartment building? Essentially, they want to make a couple of small exterior changes, which involves 3 windows on the south facade.
Isn't this a DRB issue, not an HTC?
Oh, that's right. You're right. I'll wait.
Sorry.
No, that's good. That's good. So, then that was it in terms of pre-application discussions. And I did want to say that at least Natalia and I went to the NAPC training, the CAMP training on Saturday. And we both thought it was very good. And I know Natalia wanted to at least mention a couple of things to you all today that she learned.
Yeah, I don't know, given the time and we still have the DRB ahead of us, if there's a lot of appetite for talking about, general strategies. It's the NAPC training was for community outreach strategies, which gave some great ideas for basically exactly what we were talking about. And I did want to talk about, Nick, I think in the interest of time, I'll just save it for next meeting. Even I think we all will have clearer heads.
Motion to postpone.
Yeah.
So that's great. And that way, Natalia, we can actually also, I think there were some documents that were sent around to us that we can.
Yes, and I was going to ask you to share the screen and show, because I saved all those documents. So just postpone it.
So we'll review it on the 2nd. I'll share all the documents that we got, and we can talk about it a little more in depth. So fair enough, Natalia.
Great.
Other than that, John, I've got nothing else for HTC.
Okay, then let's do them. Somebody motion to adjourn so we can quickly get the DRB out.
Oh, second.
Patricia Lang.
Lauren?
Aye.
Natalia Dukas.
Aye.
John Henke.
Aye.
Justin Colo.
Aye.
Michael Willoughby.
Aye.
Gigi Dobrecht.
Aye.
Hugh Dyer.
Aye.
Okay. So we are now opening the DRB. And John, quick note. My name is Laura, not Lauren.
I'm sorry, I keep saying that, and I don't know why. I know it is Laura.
Okay.
It's one of those days.
Yeah, I understand. So everyone, just a reminder to state your location. John Henke.
Here, still in Birmingham.
Great. Keith Dyer.
Here in Harbor Springs.
Gigi Dobrecht.
Here in Birmingham.
Natalia Dukas.
Here, Birmingham.
Dustin Colo.
Here in Birmingham.
Patricia Lang.
Birmingham.
Michael Willoughby.
Here in Birmingham.
Samantha Capello. Kathleen Creel. Charles Cusimano.
Here in Birmingham.
Elizabeth Weekend.
Here in Grosse Pointe Woods.
Great. Thank you.
All right, first up, I have the approval of the minutes.
I move we approve the minutes.
I'll second.
Gigi Dobrecht.
Aye.
Dustin Colo.
Aye.
Patricia Lang.
Aye.
Michael Willoughby.
Aye.
Keith Dyer.
Aye.
Natalia Dukas.
Aye.
John Henke.
Aye. All right. The only thing, Nick, you and I have talked about this, is Todd's room formally in front of us, even though they never submitted on time?
So yes, because I sent around notifications, so I thought it prudent to keep them on, and I gave them a little bit of a last minute chance to get me stuff. But before we get into it, I did get an email that the applicant's now asking to be postponed. And so I'm going to ask you, as it obviously is not my decision, but since the applicant has asked to postpone, I leave it up to you all to whether or not you'd like to allow them to postpone. The reason being it went a little late tonight.
How long are they, for how long are they asking to postpone?
It's up to you. In the email, she said next meeting, so I assume that means June 2nd.
And what if it doesn't come in front of us again? We have given them reams and reams of latitude and gotten nothing back. So my inclination is to deny them.
I have to agree at this point.
What does that mean?
It would mean that they would have to,
repaint it.
first of all, it means they're in violation of, that they painted, and they should get a citation for being in violation. Secondly, that would mean that they would now have to come and beg for forgiveness, that there is no longer permission, and properly submit everything and pay for it. We have nothing in front of us, and this is now at least the third time this has taken place.
Yep, I agree. That's tough love.
Since last year.
Tough love.
Nick, you mentioned that they're asking for postponement because this meeting is late, but we don't have any proposal ahead of us, so I'm not understanding the reasoning there exactly. Were they going to try to present something?
And I believe they're on the meeting, right?
So I do see them, but as I've been advised, the applicant has some, I don't know. This has never happened, but I guess Todd's raising his hand, so that's great. I guess they can answer that question, so I don't have to I don't want to, be making anything up or, hypothesizing. So I think you can unmute
Let
yourself.
Todd in.
Here he is.
Hello.
Hey, Todd.
Hey. So I guess we didn't expect this to be a working meeting. We don't understand what work. This is new to us. So a working meeting, we didn't understand it was going to take that long. That's all. Raquel has babies, so I can stay. She can go. That's fine.
This isn't a working meeting. We have given, and you haven't been around, but we have given Raquel a multitude of deadlines to get things in front of us.
Yeah.
Which haven't been met.
Okay.
And Nick has given you guys a lot of latitude with respect to that, waiting until late in the afternoon last Friday to do it. And again, it wasn't met.
Okay.
The building was painted inappropriately and without approvals last year, and we still don't have anything from you now, almost 7 months later.
Well, I apologize for that. When the last meeting we had, it was postponed indefinitely. I don't know what that means. So I was assuming that you would give us notice when we would start to work on that. Plus with COVID, it just everything pushes behind. But there's no excuse for not getting you materials on time. I can't deny that. I would like to say something about the last meeting that I have not brought up that has concerned me, and I'd like an opportunity to discuss it, if that's okay with everyone on the board.
It's been noticed, so feel free. But you've heard my comments. I think at this point, at least the inclination is to deny the application because we have nothing in front of us.
Okay.
And force you to resubmit everything. But you're more than welcome to make the comment.
I'd like to make the comment that I've lost faith in that the board can make a decision for us based on my sexuality. If you review the last meeting, a member of the board commented that the fire department should have pink uniforms also. I took that immediately as an anti-gay slur, and it has bothered me ever since. Now, I thought that meeting here, we could discuss that further and what that meant and how the board views that, but it did leave a bad taste in my mouth concerning the whole board and be able to make a decision on this.
I don't know if that was made by the board or if that was made by the resident that lives behind you.
No one commented on it. No one said that wasn't right. That wasn't, Michael, you shouldn't say that. But I have lost faith that at least that one member cannot make a decision based on his views on my sexuality. I mean, you can review the minutes. You will hear it.
At least from the chairperson standpoint, Todd, you've known me a long time.
I know.
Certainly not something that I would, ever make the comment about. And
I absolutely know that.
I frankly don't remember hearing it. So I'm happy to go back on the minutes and try and find out, who it was, when it was made and who it was made.
Michael made it, and my comment back was, women love firemen just the way they are. That was my comment back. And I quandered whether I should bring it up or not, because I don't want to think that I'm saying this because I want any sort of favoritism for the board at all. All I'm saying is that I think I've lost faith in one of the members to be able to make a decision on this.
Todd, are you saying that I'm the one who said that?
Yes, you did. Yes.
I have no recollection of that.
Well, I think you need to review them.
Furthermore, I had no idea you were gay.
Well, then the comment is inappropriate, and I was offended by it.
Well, if I did do that, then I apologize, but I have absolutely nothing against anyone being gay. And if I made it, I probably was saying something. The fire department is just the next building over.
Yeah.
And so why not paint the whole block pink or something?
I mean, I would love the whole block pink, but yeah, it would make the whole block look much better. But I do appreciate you saying that. My mission is not to try to. I just need to be honest with how I'm feeling, and that's all.
No, I mean, we appreciate that. It's I respect it. We appreciate it. Yeah. And this is really a situation, Todd, of you just haven't responded to requests for information.
Okay.
For whatever reason. But
I can give you.
It's gone on. It's just gone on. COVID, no COVID. It's just gone on too long. And Nick has tried to work with Raquel over and over again in getting the information. And we've just run out of that latitude for you.
Okay.
With respect to this.
Okay. Okay. So then, what's the next step from here? Then we should just.
So I will leave it to the rest of my commission members as to whether or not to grant your request for an adjournment, which would be to June 2nd, or the alternative is to deny the petition since we have nothing in front of us and it is noticed, and then you would have to start fresh and get it done. But realizing that you're currently in violation of the ordinance, and I believe code enforcement has been notified.
Yeah. All I can say is I would take over on this and make sure that in the next meeting all things are satisfied. But I know by our past with you that seems disingenuous, but I really do. I would live up to that commitment for you. If the board so.
All right, I'll leave it to my commission members. Do I have a motion from someone?
I have a question. Since we've been doing this now for over a year, if we delay it till June 2nd, what the request way back when was to either A, repaint or landscape in such a way to mitigate the color to make it more compatible with the rest of Birmingham in terms of appearance. So to delay it to June 2nd and then Todd, have you come back and just say, well, I like what I have, so that's it. I mean, we're wasting our time and yours.
Well, that wouldn't be my, well, it hasn't been a year that we've been working on this, but it was, that's not would be my intention to do that. I would want to, obviously I know you guys don't care for it, so I would want to come halfway someplace and come up with some solution for us.
I think what you'd have to do, Todd, is work with Nick in a very expedient manner to try and get something, a new proposal or significantly revised proposal to get in front of us before June 2nd.
Then
Which it can't be June 2nd. It's got to be ahead of that time so that Nick can.
yeah,
Right. It's next Friday.
So that by next Friday, giving him stuff,
Correct.
I could do that. I will give you my word. I will do that.
Again, I'll leave it to everybody else. I don't have
I understand your frustration. I get it. So I'm a layman when it comes to all this, but it doesn't matter. I'm leaving up to the board.
Okay. Do I have a motion for my commissioners?
Sure, I would move we postpone this until a date certain of June 2nd.
I second.
Any discussion on that motion?
The only discussion is,
Coming
Nick,
from the
if you don't get anything, I think at that point, all of us are wasting our time. So, you know, hopefully you'll get an appropriate package by June or next Friday.
You will.
Okay.
You will. I personally guarantee you will.
All right. Laura?
Keith Dyer.
Aye.
Patricia Lang.
Aye.
Michael Willoughby.
Aye.
Judy Brecht.
Aye.
Natalia Dukas.
Aye.
John Henke.
Aye.
Dustin Colo.
Before I vote, John, it looks like there's a question from Nick.
Oh, Nick?
I think we can finish voting. Thank you, Dustin. We can finish voting, but I do have a comment before we wrap this up completely.
All right, aye.
Great. That's everyone.
Okay. So I just wanted to make it clear because there seems like there was a little bit of confusion before. And we talked about landscaping, we talked about paint last time. My understanding was this board was looking for a change in paint, but would also appreciate some landscaping. And the images I got that were late were only landscaping. So it'd be nice just to clear the air and, you know, let Todd know what exactly, you know, you thought you asked him to do last time, which I thought was but
and as I understood it, Nick, I'd agree. I think, Todd, it's both paint and you know, some alternative colors as well as landscaping.
From what I recall from the last meeting, it was like, give us some ideas of how to either change some of it or to soften it down or to totally change it. It was kind of like give us ideas on how you alter this so it's not so and not just in landscaping. So
right.
Yes, I agree, and I have those, and we'll give those to him Friday.
Okay.
I appreciate his last chance. I appreciate it.
All right.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Get with Nick quickly.
I will. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nick? I know that now you've got the forefront. Anything else you want?
No, just the forefront. Are those windows okay? And also their plan to change the 2 front units there to an office use, which is all permitted by the ordinance. There are no ordinance issues. It's just a question of whether or not you need to see it again. Or may I do it administratively?
What I saw him find admin, I don't think you need to bring him back, but I'll leave it to everybody else's opinion on that as well.
Can you show it again real quick, Nick? I'm sorry.
No problem.
I don't think I need, I agree that it can be done administratively. I guess it just.
So those 3 windows are the only new exterior proposals. Oops, I shouldn't have done that. And then as I mentioned, they want to switch these front 2 to office. They would be separate. Interior, separate entrances, exclusive of one another, and allowed by the ordinance. So
I think it's fine to be administratively approved personally.
Okay. Any other qualms?
I agree.
Nick, I had one question. I can't remember where it was, but one of the signs that you administratively approved had a red backer.
I saw that it's the
Probably
LA insurance one.
LA Insurance on Cole Street.
Probably LA Insurance.
Yeah. Not objecting or anything, but I just was surprised that, we talked about backers before, and that as you start adding color, that becomes the sign, the backer, not the verbiage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I calculated that whole backer into the permitted combined sign area.
Oh, it was more the color, not the size. I just was surprised. I mean, I know the intent is to try to make bright colors, in that area, but as I said, I was just surprised.
Okay. Surprised as in you think when it comes to what I'll say is more bold colors, you may like to may prefer to see it first?
Yeah, I would personally, because in that case, I think I'd like the bold colors in the sign, not necessarily enhancing the backer. It was kind of like the one we discussed last meeting, that ended up being all blue.
Okay.
But it's diminishing.
Yeah, I'm happy to take anything that's on the border of bold and normal, if you will, just to get your opinions on it before, if that's what the board would like. That's just fine for me.
Anything else from anybody?
Well, I'll bring this up. I told Nick about it a couple weeks or last week. 743 Frank Street, they took at least two big trees down on the west side of the house. And Nick said that wasn't permitted. I didn't know if it was or not.
No, I don't recall any trees on any proposal and at any point. And as this board probably knows, actually, when it comes to historic reviews, trees are actually important.
Part of it, yeah.
Potentially had been around since the time the house was built. So I haven't been there myself.
But I don't know if they were that old, but they were there when I lived there.
Nick, you may want to give them a friendly reminder before they invite Edward Scissorhands back out.
Yeah, maybe I'll at least make them mention it.
And they don't need to know that I told you.
No, I could have driven by and noticed.
This meeting is being televised, right?
Oh, shit.
It is.
Sorry. We should have reminded people at the beginning.
That's right. All right. Do we have anything else? Well, thank you all. I know it was a long night with a lot of information. I truly do appreciate everybody's comments. I will tell you, I'm absolutely passionate about protecting our downtowns, as you can tell. So I do appreciate your patience and input from everybody on this one, on all of it.
Yep.
I think it went well. So I'll get with the SHPO. I will report back and we'll see where it goes.
Okay. All I need is a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
I move we adjourn.
Oh.
Should have adjourned 5 minutes.
Patricia?
Patricia Lang.
Aye.
Ginger Brecht. Keith Dyer.
Aye.
Natalia Dukas.
Aye.
John Hankey.
Aye.
Dustin Colo.
Aye.
Michael Willoughby. Michael Willoughby?
Aye.
Okay,
He said it, but I couldn't hear it. Yeah.
great. Have a good night, everyone.
Night.
Good night.
Thank you as well.
Good night.
See you next time.